It's another day, and this is the AM show with me, Bernice Abubedulansa. I'm really grateful that you make time this morning to join me on the most comprehensive morning show in the country, one that puts your needs in focus. Today, for my news review, I'll be joined by lawyer Bobby Bunsen, and we will be dissecting the issues in the various newspapers. And then for our big stories, we're still talking about the IMF conditionalities. A senior lecturer at the University of Ghana's Political Science Department has expressed disappointment with those conditionalities. We will be getting into the details. According to Professor Gyampo, Ghana is a highly corrupt country, and the institution has provided no substantial help to check leakages and spillages. Mr. Gyampo thinks that an IMF deal that is no longer perturbed about curbing a country's corruption cannot be taken seriously. Now, we analyze this and other conditionalities with Professor Lord Mensah. He's a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Dr. Patrick Assuming, an economist also at the University of Ghana Business School. Also on the show, some parents and guardians are worried about how a book approved by the National Council for Curriculum and Assessment portrays Christian religion. The book, authored by Francis Benjamin Appiah and Henry David Appiah, titled History of Ghana for Basic Schools, opines that religion is a major cause of physical and doctrinal disputes in Ghana, and that Christianity has led to an increase in poverty. Well, we'll have a conversation on how that curriculum for Ghana's educational sector is done, and also pick reactions to the contents of that book. My guest, Dr. Peter Anti, Executive Director at the Institute for Education Studies, and Divine Pe, Programs Manager, Africa Education Watch. We will get interactive much later on the show. Up next is the AM News. Do stay. And for our first story in the news today, the Judicial Service Staff Association of Ghana, JUSAG, has declared a nationwide strike. Now, the group is demanding an increase in salaries of members. JUSAG President Samuel Afote Otu says members of the group will stay away from work until concerns are addressed. Legal Affairs correspondent Joseph Akable reports.
JUSAG has in the last 2 weeks served notice of its plans to embark on the strike over failure of government to adjust salaries. The National Labour Commission intervened, but JUSAG is unimpressed.
The National Executive Council of JUSAG, upon consultation with Senior Staff Association, Judicial Service Ladies Association of Ghana, the Finance Association, Staff Association, drivers, and all stakeholders, by this declaration of strike, all staff of the service are immediately directed until the President of Ghana complies with Article 149 of the Constitution by approving and paying our salaries with all the arrears from January to date. All staff are also to know the following. The security men and women are to stay at post, but make sure that all entrances to the court and other offices are allowed to prevent entry into the court or any premises of the service. All drivers are directed to hand over their official vehicles in their custody to the transport department. No driver shall drive any office vehicle or any officer or any jet during the period of the strike. No court registrar, I repeat, no court registrar or be compelled to open any registry or court for use during the period of the strike. Regional Executive Board and committee members of JUSAG are to be on the lookout to ensure compliance, same as SAGO executives. If any staff of the service receive any treatment from any management member to report to work or perform any official duty during the strike, shall decline saying and report the matter to JUSAG. Let no one in government or management unlawfully coerce any staff or intimidate staff during the strike. If any member is inflicted with any injustice in this cause, we shall deem it as all members have been infringed. Consequently, we shall respond in equal proportion.
This move means all courts will be closed, bringing justice administration to its knees. Only time will tell how soon government will intervene.
Now, the Municipal Chief Executive for Ayawasu East, Salma Sani Mohammed, says more than 12 kilometers of inner roads in the municipality have been given out on contract. According to her, the approval was made this week and contractors are expected to commence work soon. Her response follows an ultimatum issued by disgruntled residents of Nima earlier this month over a deplorable road network and other developmental challenges in the area.
Nima is not that big. We are doing about 11 point something, almost 12 kilometers. The inner roads and the Nima highway. Actually, they gave us 30 days, but I called all of them verbally, and I'm going to organize a meeting with all of them, because as I mentioned, the time they handed over the petition, that the Ministry of Roads and Highway, they've given approval, and then it reached at that time the procurement level. Yesterday, it was awarded to a contractor. The contractor promised he will come very soon after the rainy season, because as we are all aware, they cannot construct a road during rainy season. So it will be fixed very soon, God willing. What I want to do actually, before I step down in 2024, we have challenges. We face a lot of challenges. This work we've done so far, it has taken a lot from us. Engaging our people, pleading with them so they can allow us to do this project. What we want to do actually, after all this hard working, we had approval for Agenda 111, that is District Hospital. We've gotten the approval. And then we have a space. So I'm pleading with my people, they should support and help to demolish the place so that we can hand over to Agenda 111. And then inshallah, concerning the road, we are going to see the road very soon fixed in Ayawasu East.
Now, the sanitation team of the Accra Metropolitan Assembly stormed the Kwame Nkrumah Circle to drive away homeless street dwellers. These individuals have been using some parts under the overhead bridge as their place of abode. Team lead Florence Kuchi says this particular group of people is responsible for filth in the area. Prince Owusu-Ansah reports.
Kwame Nkrumah Interchange, also known as Accra Dubai, is a 3-tier interchange that was constructed to ease traffic in the heart of the city. However, homeless individuals have now turned it into a shelter. Out there, homeless persons use rugs, tattered mattresses and pavement blocks on the walkway to create makeshift beds along the road. To them, they see the place as home. But the Accra Metropolitan Assembly sanitation team is driving these homeless dwellers off the street. Victor Kote is deputy head of waste management at the AMA.
You know, this is not a bedroom. They are not supposed to be here because public property, that public money have been spent to construct, they are destroying them. They are moving the pavement blocks, and as city authorities, we cannot allow this to continue. So they have to be out of the place. They are not supposed to be here. They are messing up the place, they are destroying public infrastructure, and we cannot allow that.
However, some homeless individuals say they have no place to go. Meanwhile, the head of the AMA sanitation team, Florence Kuchi, indicates the assembly will collaborate with the police to force them out in the coming days.
After this exercise today, you see that we are not here with them. We don't have any police officer with us. So we want to ensure that we take everyone that sleep on it. Then from here, we will tell them nobody should sleep here again. We will give them a warning. From now till tomorrow, we shall be coming back. When we come back and we'll meet them, we'll come back with the police and we'll ensure that the law has taken its own course.
She adds that the AMA will not allow Accra Dubai to be a waste generating center. A report by Prince Owusu-Ansah read to you.
Sex for jobs, sexual abuse in the fishing industry and corporate organizations, poor remuneration are among a litany of complaints listed as part of human rights abuses in businesses in Ghana. The Attorney General's Office and the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, RAJ, are spearheading and working with other institutions on the development of a national action plan to stem the tide. The concerns about business-related abuse came up during a stakeholder consultation workshop that will be incorporated in that particular NAP at Takrade in the Western region. Maxwell Agbagba is there for us and reports.
The National Action Plan on Business and Rights has arisen in response to the concerns of the United Nations about the poor human rights provisions and enforcement in businesses and the need for businesses to respect human rights in all their dealings. Some countries have already produced and activated their action plans, while several others are now in the process of doing so. Ghana has already initiated the process to produce a national action plan for promoting human rights in businesses. And the consultation workshop in the Western region has brought together various stakeholders to gather views to be incorporated. In an interview with Joy News, the chairperson of the Business and Human Rights National Action Plan Steering Committee, Dr. Sylvia Dusu, said concerns about sexual abuse in the fishing industry and others came up strongly during the SAP group discussions.
In the group that I headed, the people are saying that there's a lot of sexual harassment in the fishing industry, and that young girls especially are being used in the fishing industry as prostitutes because of the poverty, the endemic poverty in this area. And then I can see that there's no avenue for these girls to have redress. The very people that they could have complained to are the people who are perpetrating these human rights violations. The fishermen also complain that the Navy are harassing them on the sea, and that they take the fish, the little fish they are able to catch from them. And among that also, I think the media has also complained of sexual harassment. And so there's a lot of recommendations have come out on what we should do about it. And I think they are very important recommendations. One of them is that the chieftaincy institution should be empowered to be able to help against these human rights abuses.
Chief State Attorney at the Office of the Attorney General in the Western Region, Patience Klinogo, says there exists an unacceptable gap in the integration of human rights into the principles and practice of business management in Ghana. The National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights will help deal with the problem.
You remember recently, during the World Press Freedom Day celebration, Professor Odikatoko, in delivering the State of the Ghanaian Media Report, that's 2023, stated that salaries of media practitioners are shockingly low, and that some journalists earn as low as 500 to 1,000 cedis a month. Think about the case of the so-called casual worker, who after working for months or 2 to 3 years or more, is sent home without any benefit being paid to him. Think also of the stories of some foreign companies in Ghana, where Ghanaian workers are threatened with grants just because they demand respect of certain rights. There was even the story of a director of a foreign company in Ghana who used to allegedly urinate into the water they were supposed to drink. And remember the issue of sexual harassment at workplaces. Several women have complained about being asked to sleep with their employers to get their jobs or promotion. Of course, many claim they declined such offers and lost their jobs. And what about the story of sex for grace in our universities?
Member of the steering committee and lead anchor for the drafting of the action plan, Victor Broby, says, among others, the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights will introduce a public assessment and ranking of businesses based on their human rights record.
It's potential human rights. That's basically what human rights due diligence process does. We are going to create a business and human rights rating system. In other words, Shraj, in conjunction with other stakeholders, are going to rank companies on their compliance levels with business and human rights norms. So to the extent to which you undertake human rights due diligence policies, the extent to which you have human rights policies in place, the extent to which you are good human rights citizens. And of course, these rankings will be published and would serve as a guide to the general public that wants to interact and be consumers of these companies.
Western Regional Minister Kwabena Ochudako-Mensah says the National Action Plan, when activated, will enhance the protection of rights.
Businesses thrive to grow the economy of countries, but we cannot do it at the expense of human rights. Okay, so this workshops is to put together all the policies and the law and the framework that government want to present to the people of Ghana and to businesses and say, look, this is the way you should apply yourself if about you are doing business.
Say, and rapid. You're still watching the AM News with me, Bernice Abubedu-Lansa. 1 in every 300 females in Africa is in a forced marriage. That's according to the Global Slavery Index 2023 report by Walk Free. It's an Australia-based international human rights group working to accelerate the end of all forms of modern slavery. Speaking at the launch of a report in Ghana, President of Challenging Heights, James Kofi Annan, called on African governments to immediately move from intention to effective action in addressing modern slavery.
Over 468 billion of imports are goods such as electronics, garments, palm oil, solar panels, and textiles, leading the pack of products at risk of modern slavery, which are imported into the G20 member countries alone. African job seekers misled by traffickers with false promises are subjected to forced labor abroad, such as in the Gulf states. Children are also exploited in their pursuit of education. For example, under the Confiage Trust system in Togo, children from rural areas are sent to cities to complete their education and live with relatives who may force them into domestic servitude. Nigerian girls seeking employment as domestic helpers to help pay for schooling are also subjected to domestic servitude. In Senegal, the Taliban children in Quranic schools are forced to beg. In Africa, forced marriage particularly impacts women and girls. 1 in every 300 females in the region was in a forced marriage. In the aftermath of COVID-19 pandemic, reports of child marriages increased in Sudan, Egypt, and parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo. African countries must take urgent steps to pass supply chain due diligence laws to not only protect the rights of workers, but also to protect its international business relations. Ghana must demonstrate commitment and take decisive action to address the plight of the over 20,000 child trafficking victims on Lake Volta.
And before I leave, researchers at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology are urging the Ghana Health Service to expand the use of WhatsApp in antenatal care services. This comes at the back of a research involving the records of over 34,000 patients in Kumasi. The report found a substantial improvement in antenatal care and delivery services with the use of WhatsApp. Lava FM's Kwesi Deborah speaks with lead researcher Kwame Sarkodie Safo for Tech Thursday.
During the COVID-19 era, many hospitals in Ghana suffered a drop in antenatal care and delivery services. WhatsApp was therefore employed to urge mothers to attend antenatal care and delivery services. The researchers found an increase in antenatal care from 37% in 2020 to 53% in 2021, and delivery services from 26% in 2020 to 41% in 2021. Kwame Sarkodie is lead researcher.
My area of mobile health was chosen due to the fear in COVID, how patients were afraid to come into contact with providers, and providers were afraid to come into contact with patients. So who should connect who to who? I set out to find, firstly, the uptake of ANC, that's antenatal care service, the postnatal care service, and delivery service, to know how it's being worked on. Then the second one was on the enablers with the use of mobile health, factors that enabled providers to use that. And the third one was the challenges associated with the usage of mobile health for maternal health referrals. Yeah, these were the three areas I looked at. From the first objective, I saw that antenatal care service was on the rise due to the use of the mobile health for referrals. Postnatal care declined during that period because the mothers thought that if I was exposed and I'm safe, now my child is in, I'll not expose my child, so that side declined. But deliveries was up. So with antenatal and deliveries, we saw that it was on a rise because they had no option than to attend the facilities. But where their child was included, that one came down. Firstly, I recommend that Ministry of Health should get something like WhatsApp Health. They have WhatsApp Business. They should get WhatsApp Health so that the security and privacy component of it could be secured. Then to the municipal should also make sure that at least one smartphone and data bundle should be provided for the key informant person at each facility so that they will facilitate that referral. Then finally, to the healthcare workers, they should also do the two-step security on WhatsApp so that they will secure the platform in order not to be hacked.
Reporting for Joy News, Kwesi Deborah.
And that's how we end this edition of the AM News. Do stay with me. I will be back and we will be looking at the headlines in the papers. Do stay. This is the AM show. It's now time to bring you what's on the front pages and other details in the various newspapers. And so for the Daily Graphic, for example, on the front page you have AU at 60, silence the Ghan's armed conflicts threat to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That's according to Professor Inchi Danso. And free SHS suppliers give NAFCO 2-week ultimatum. We will be getting into that story. And on the front of justice, ahead of vetting tomorrow, has company law sculpted Justice Gertrude Tokono for Ghana? And that's a question. And the story is captured on pages 10 and 39. And Chief Justice Enini Yeboah retires. He did so yesterday. And this one on mental health. Mental cases increasing, data reveals. And shortly, I will be joined by lawyer Bobby Banson, and we will be getting into the details of these stories. On the back page of the Daily Graphic, 3-story building collapses at Winneba. Thankfully, 5 escape unhurt. And it is almost, I think, about the 3rd building collapse in about a month we have recorded. Now, Stanbic Bank donates laptops to KNUST. Let's move to the Daily Guide. Front page, NPP guru storms Asin North for another by-election. That's on the front page of the Daily Guide. And Veep opens BOG's Cyber Security Center. And the president says, we will be disciplined with IMF deal. Much later on the show, for our first big story, we'll be looking at the conditionalities which Professor Gyampo has complained about. No we licensing, Supreme Court insists. And that particular verdict created a lot of buzz on social media. And there were even conversations about the different types of weed and whether cannabis, Indian hemp, and weed are all the same thing. Boga MP back in court for criminal trial. And the Boga MP here is James Dachikwason. That's how the Daily Guide chooses to refer to him as. And you may recall that civil case, which was in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court gave a verdict on that, asking Parliament to expunge his name. There is the criminal angle also, and that is being heard in court. Kudus set to quit Ajax. Interesting. And UAE envoy to chair peace event in Kumasi. Back page of the Daily Guide. And on the front page of the Business Finder, BOG moves against cyber threats. And as Veep commissions robust infrastructure, IMF directs Bank of Ghana to scrap supply of cheap dollars to BDCs. Will that influence the cost of fuel? We will see. Green Ghana, Ministry courts Omanhine's support. And the New Crusading Guide has that one we brought you as a first story, as its big story. JUSAG embarks on strike. Also on the front page, Baumia commissions BOG cybersecurity infrastructure and arrest Akwemu Omanhene. That's from the Amwafro family, and they are petitioning the IGP. It will be interesting to see why, though. But let's go back to the Daily Graphic and see what the details are in there with some of the major stories that we have been highlighting. This one on the vetting of Chief Justice nominee Gertrude Tokono tomorrow. So pages 10 and 29. And the headline is a question. It says, has company law sculpted Justice Gertrude Tokono for Ghana? Well, so it's the reason why you have it on pages 10 and 39 is because it's a full story. So it's spread across that entire length of paper. And it's an interesting read, but the story is by Ace Anan Ankoma. And the story starts with a quote from Socrates. Listen courteously, answer wisely, consider soberly, and decide impartially. Ghana expects a lot more of a Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary, described by Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers 1778 as the least dangerous branch of government because it has no influence over either the sword or the purse. However, our Chief Justice is the fourth person in the constitutional order of precedence, is a member of every superior court, and chairs the Judicial Council and Rules of Court Committee. The Chief Justice also plays critical roles in the removal from office of the President, Superior Court judges, Auditor General, Commissioners and Deputy Commissioners of the Electoral Commission and Shraj, and Governor of the Bank of Ghana. And so he goes on to talk about how the parliamentary approval process proves the Chief Justice nominee's judicial philosophy, background, and all. It's quite an interesting read, but basically what it is that it is running you through the roles of a Chief Justice and juxtaposing that in many other things that, or many other cases that she has sat on. Right. So it comes along with some interesting photos of Her Ladyship Justice Gertrude Tokono. And like I said, some cases that she sat on there. But the writer is senior partner of the law firm of Benti Enchil Lecha and Ankoma, and that's Ace Anan Ankoma. Hopefully, lawyer Bobby Banson will be joining us shortly, and it will be interesting to hear what he also makes of the happenings in our judiciary currently. But as you may be aware, the Chief Justice, Justice Enini Yeboah, has retired. Now, this one about mental health. Mental health is something that we all should pay attention to, and I'm glad it's on the front page of the Daily Graphic. But the story is captured on page 16. And it reads, it's a story by Augustina Teria. Schizophrenia, a mental health disorder, is on the rise in the country, with 8,446 people presenting with the condition as at the end of March this year. Now, these are people who have gone to health facilities, so imagine the others. From 19,856 persons who presented for help with the condition in 2020, the cases increased to 20,755 in 2021 and 24,790 in 2022. Schizophrenia is a mental disorder characterized by persistent psychotic symptoms such as auditory and or visual hallucinations, delusional thinking, disassociation from reality, and disorganized thoughts and behavior. It usually begins to manifest when the patients are in their early 20s, although in rare cases, symptoms can show in early childhood. So, yes, what the doctors recommend, right? Just like how you visit the hospital probably twice a year, once a year to get your health checked, your heart, you do your cardio, you check your blood, you check for the presence of, other things that may signal a certain disease or a certain condition with an organ. Doctors recommend that you also go check your mental health. It is important. And in most of the cases, early detection is always the best. And so you just want to keep that on the fore as well and not allow your mental health to get in a worse state. Well, we've been joined by lawyer Bobby Banson via phone. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us this morning. So on the front page of the Daily Graphic, I was just referring to that vetting tomorrow of Her Ladyship Justice Gertrude Tokono, and she is the President's nominee as the next Chief Justice of the Republic of Ghana. And lawyer Ace Anan Ankoma has quite a lengthy piece on her and the cases she sat on and all that. But what is your impression of Her Ladyship, and what are your expectations, that is, if she's approved, of her contribution to the judiciary?
And thanks for the opportunity. Good morning to your viewers and listeners. I think that most lawyers who have practiced for some time and have experienced work as a justice of the Superior Court will attest to her disposition to her getting things done and getting things done the way they should be done. I think that she comes across as someone who is firm in her beliefs or her conviction, and then will ensure that the way she knows things must be done, how she will get it done. I do not expect anything less than building upon the legacies of all the Chief Justices in recent times that I have experienced in the course of my work as a legal practitioner, and make justice delivery system more accessible to a lot of persons. You will notice that at least since the time of Justice Sofia Kufu, there have been attempts to open more courts in various parts of the country. That attempt was also continued by the Justice Enini Yeboah, and so I expect that would also be continued by Justice Tokono. you would also see that at least there have been some reforms in the various administrative procedures. We've had under the commercial courts coming in, the general divisions of the court to ensure that there is speedy administration of justice in those matters. You'd also notice that a lot of directions, administrative directions have been issued over time to ensure that the court officers do their work in the best possible manner. So we expect that over time, since there has been an intentional attempt, we could see that it's very intentional to make justice delivery system more accessible and more efficient, that legacy would be built on by Justice Tokono.
Well, interesting days ahead. Lawyer Bobby Banson, there's also a story, right, that generated some discussions on social media and had to do with the Supreme Court's insistence on no-we licensing. And this story is in the Daily Guide, written by Jibril Abdul Razak. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed its decision to declare as unconstitutional a section of the Narcotic Control Commission Act 2020 Act 1019, which permitted the issuance of license to an institution to cultivate a small amount of cannabis in Ghana for industrial and medicinal use. This was after the court, presided over by Justice Jones Doche, in a 5-4 majority, dismissed a motion for review filed by the Attorney General, challenging the court's original decision that the law was unconstitutionally passed by Parliament. The Supreme Court in July 2022, in its decision on a case filed by private citizen Iziam Manan against the Attorney General, held that Section 4.3 of the Narcotics Control Commission Act 2020 Act 1019, which permitted the issuance of the special license, contravened Article 106 2A, B5 and 6 thereof of the 1992 Constitution, which stipulates the processes a bill must go through before it is passed into law by Parliament. Section 4.3 of Act 1019 states that the minister, on the recommendation of the Commission, may grant a license for the cultivation of cannabis, popularly referred to as weed in Ghana, which is not more than 0.3% THC content on dry weight basis for industrial purposes, for obtaining fiber or seed for medicinal purposes. Now, the court consequently declared Section 4.3 of the Narcotics Control Commission Act null, void, and of no effect, and subsequently struck it out as unconstitutional because it is a violation of Article 106 of the 1992 Constitution. Now, let me just quickly move on to what the Attorney General's argument was. Now, the Attorney General, Godfrey Yeboah-Dame, in a review motion, argued the original 7-member panel committed an error of law resulting in a substantial miscarriage of justice. He said it is only at the beginning of the process that there must be a memorandum. Mr. Dame argued that the memorandum anticipated a situation where Parliament could make exceptions to laws allowing such cultivation. He therefore urged the court to be very concerned about the undue curtailment of Parliament's legislative powers, adding that at the bedrock of the country's constitution is the concept of separation of powers. The motion was opposed by Efiba Amehia, counsel for Mr. Manan, who argued that no miscarriage of justice had been occasioned. She added that at the time the memorandum was being tabled before Parliament, the amendment complained of was not added to the law that the cultivation of weed was going to be allowed. The court, in a 5-4 majority decision, ruled that the review threshold of the court was not met, and the motion was subsequently dismissed. Justice Jones Doche and Justices Prof. Ni Ashikote, Mariama Owusu, Professor Henrietta Mensah Bonsu, and Yoni Kulendi formed the majority, while Justices Avril Lovelace Johnson, Amadou Tanko, Samuel Esiedu, and George Kumsen formed the minority. I don't know what you make of this very interesting play out here in the Supreme Court. And at the heart of this is the separation of powers issue that the Attorney General raises. I don't know what you make of this, Lawyer Bobby Banson.
Well, the ruling yesterday by the Supreme Court was not necessarily on the merit of the case that had been tabled before them and decided in July 2022 last year. So what happened yesterday was a decision on a review application. Now, the review application is an application that is made to the Supreme Court to demonstrate, the applicant ought to demonstrate that the earlier decision by the Supreme Court, there was a grave error of law apparent on the face of the judgment, which the Supreme Court ought now to set aside. And so the threshold for a review application is that you must demonstrate that the decision by the court, the same Supreme Court, they did not consider legal prescriptions, or there was an omission of an application of a very sacrosanct judicial principle, which had resulted in a miscarriage of justice. So it is not an opportunity for the party to re-argue his case. And so it is not as if they re-heard the entire case. That is why the review application is a very technical procedure, that unless you're able to demonstrate that, for example, there's an act of parliament that the Supreme Court did not consider, or there is an evidence that he had already submitted that the Supreme Court did not consider, it's very difficult for the Supreme Court to review its previous decision. And so yesterday, the Supreme Court did not go to the merits of the case again. They did not sort of rehear the entire argument. They only looked at whether or not the decision that they made earlier, there was grave error on it. And, you know, like the practice, if the original decision was heard by 7 members of the panel, with the review application, 2 other members will be added so that they arrive at that decision. And so I was not surprised when they dismissed the application for review, because they had made up their mind that they were not going to allow, or they were going to declare that, or they had decided, rather, majority had decided that they were going to declare that provision unconstitutional. And so it would have been difficult for you to be able to, the applicant, which is the Attorney General, to be able to demonstrate that there were exceptional circumstances warranted by a grave error, either on omission of a particular statute or application of it, that will require them to have a second look at that decision. Be that as it may, and again, this is for the discourse, you see, this review application was filed by the Attorney General, and yet the Supreme Court decided against it. And so, even though we are talking about separation of powers of the legislature, I think the independence of the judiciary has further been exemplified by their decision not to agree with the government, which is represented by the Attorney General, on such an important government policy. We all know how some members of the ruling government really advocated for the passage of this act, and yet the Supreme Court has taken a different view. And so those who always make the argument that the Supreme Court in particular, the judiciary, is in bed with any government at any point in time, should be having a rethink of that position. And then look at this instance. This is a huge policy by the government, and yet the Supreme Court has disagreed with them on 2 occasions. And so, I mean, it is their decision. Like I said, at this stage, it wasn't whether or not that provision in the Narcotics Control Act amendment was constitutional or not. Yesterday, that wasn't what they decided.
Right.
They decided whether their earlier decision, there was error apparent on the face of it, which has led to a miscarriage of justice.
But, I mean, you are right when you say that it is an indication of the independence of the judiciary when a government policy or a case brought by the Attorney General is, like you say, in people's estimation, not just looked at as or rubber stamped, right? But does it matter or does it change anything, the 5-4? So you have 5 on the majority, 4 in the minority. Does that change anything? Even though the majority got the day, I'm looking at the numbers specifically.
At the end of the day, it's the majority. You don't always expect that it to be 7-0 or 9-0. That's what I'm saying, that the judges, they do conference. If they agree on a particular position, they are allowed to express it. If they do not agree on a particular position, they are allowed to express it. So it is not as if they are whipped into line by taking on steam forces or on steam hands, as sometimes people perceive. That they are whipped into line so that they all take a particular decision or they all throw a certain line. This is not the case. You see 4 members deciding that they do not agree with what their colleagues on the same bench, in the same room. Imagine them having conference at a round table and discussing. Those who are in the minority must try and convince those in the majority to join them and vice versa. If that does not happen, then the divides must still remain, and when they appear at the plenary of the court, they will have to now announce that unfortunately it is not a unanimous decision, it is 5-4. These are the basis of the majority decision. These are the basis of the decision of the minority.
Interesting. I was just wondering if, for those who make the argument of whether or not this is unanimous and the signal that you were trying to hint at about a certain level of independence. That's why I brought in the numbers. But there's more happening in the country besides that. There's the issue of the IMF directing the BOG to scrap supply of cheap dollars to bulk oil distribution companies. And we know how over the years in this country, lawyer, we try to intervene, we try to help in mitigating things one way or the other so that we don't have a situation in this particular instance in terms of fuel, having to pay too much because the BDCs may not be able to transfer the cost of their running their business onto the consuming public. There are also concerns about the IMF conditionalities. I don't know if you've gone through the document and what your thinking also is about it. Professor Gyampo, for example, thinks that, I mean, the document does not make provision, for example, for dealing with issues of corruption and leakages. What are your thoughts?
Dennis, you know, we have to say Section 5. We cannot eat our cake as a country or as citizens and have it. How we got to IMF, that discussion will come past it. We are there. Whether we like it, whether we don't like it, whether it's shameful, whether it's not shameful, whether it's caused by mismanagement, whatever we may ascribe as the reasons why we are there. Now, what is the benefit of going to IMF? I am not an economist, so I would not want to speak as if I know better than those that actually deal with this matter. As a layman, my view was that going to IMF would give us some form of credibility internationally to be able to source for more funds or go back to the international market. Now, when you go to IMF, definitely, like we all knew, they are going to come with the conditions. Now, these conditions, would they, in the long run, if we abide by them, put our economy on a certain stable foot or a certain level pedestal to be able to move the country forward? I know a lot of, because you see, our problem, including me as a citizen, we are used to a lot of freebies, and we threaten the political establishment with the fact that if they take away the freebies we've enjoyed since independence, we are not going to vote for them. And so they almost always kowtow to these threats, and then we come back to that same center.
But Lawyer Bunsen, this is about the availability, right? So for many of the bulk oil distribution companies, they're not able to get dollars in the open market at affordable rates. And what that will mean is that we will have to pay for more. So that's why the Bank of Ghana decided to come up with a certain program that allows for them to get it at a certain rate so that we don't end up paying so much at the pumps. Does that also account or amount to a freebie for you?
Well, what I'm saying, yes, but I'm not necessarily saying that the policy or those conditions are perfect. That is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that I would say it's freebies, but of course, it seems to me that it's at a discounted rate because you said that the cost that they get in open market is definitely more than the DOD is offering them or offers to them. And that eventually, because they buy it at a higher amount, it will affect their cost factor, which then they will pass on to the consumer. Now, what is the other side? DOD does not make any profit from their operations, except the one that will affect, or their operations affect the economy as a whole. And so if they are giving dollars to a certain sector of the economy at a discounted rate, it means somebody is paying for it somewhere. Because where would they get the difference from? If on the open market the cost is more, and then the BOG is offering to you less, it means the difference is a loss that somebody is paying for. Is it the government? No, because the government doesn't pay for anything except the citizen. So eventually, whatever difference that the BOG is losing because they are offering these dollars to the bulk oil distributors at a certain rate, that difference is being paid for by you and I in another form. Either we are going for loan to pay for it, which will come back to us, or we are paying for it by our taxes. So I do not know the full extent of those machinations and how they work, but I think that it's a matter of communication. If there is serious open communication or discussions or engagement between the bulk oil distributors, the DOG, the public is educated, we may be able to understand fully the implications of all these measures. And in the long term, because for me that is my opinion, that in the long term, these things should be able to benefit us. We should stop doing like the stopgap measures, which we've been doing since independence, and after 20 years or 10 years, we cannot support it anymore. We have to go to IMF. So those are my preliminary observations. Like I said, I am not an economist, and so I will not know the exact details. On this issue, I'm purely speaking as a layperson.
Right, and closely linked to that story is another in the Daily Guide on page 6, a story by Enes Kofi-Edu, in which the president is saying that his government will be disciplined with the IMF deal. And he was speaking in an interview at the Qatar Economic Forum in Doha yesterday. He stated that his government would work quickly to bring the fiscal deficit, which is mandated by law to be at 5%, to a reasonable level, conceding that it was already far beyond the mark. Quote, rationalization of our expenditure, rationalization of government expenditure is something that we've given assurance. Domestic revenue mobilization is absolutely critical for us, and already we are seeing signs. He stated that Ghana has prepared itself to re-enter the international market, which had been a source of funding for the country during the first 3 or 4 years of his government, but added that the government was not in a hurry to do so. It always is the case, well, most of the time, isn't it, that we successfully implement our IMF deals, and that's because there always is a quote-unquote certain big brother, a certain third eye watching or cross-checking that we are sticking to the agreement, to what we have agreed to do. The bigger conversation, I guess, is whether or not we'll be able to carry that level of discipline when we exit an IMF deal, isn't it?
Yes, that was by whether or not to be able to bear that discipline. And that is what I think.
Sorry, Lawyer Banson, your line is breaking.
Is it better?
Is it possible to reposition yourself, please?
Yes, Bennett. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's much better.
Okay. So it's that question that we've all been asking ourselves every time we come to that program, whether we'll be disciplined enough to maintain the fiscal policies that we introduced into our economy or our governance structure by virtue of the IMF program that gave us that stability that we want. And that is why I think that mostly the political establishment, they always want to seek favor from us by giving us things or spending beyond their means. I understand that corruption is the major key, and for me, that is more important than any other thing in this discussion. But if the political establishment are not corrupt by themselves, it's us who cause them. Who accommodates the corruption, encourage, and so we must also be disciplined in that respect. And we pray that the class, and in this case the MPP government, will really, really, really be disciplined and stop those expenditures that do not directly or remember how they said they will not go to IMF once we put
Oh, too bad, Lawyer Banson. I'm losing you again. I hope you can hear me, though. There are a couple of stories I would like to take your view on, and then we'll wrap it up here on the News Review segment. JUSAG has embarked on a strike, the Judicial Service Staff Association of Ghana. I'm just wondering how that affects your work as a lawyer and what your thoughts are. They have been hinting at this for some time. They didn't just get up and embark on the strike, but they have accused government of consistent dishonesty in attending to their conditions of service and other emolument owed members. The association says its proposals to government on the implementation of the approved cost of living allowance for members were not urgently attended to.
Well, I read their release, and I was very touched that they've been treated like this all these years. Well, as a lawyer, they've read that the drivers shouldn't even drive the judges to work. And so it means that there's nothing that could be done. They've asked that the court premises should not be opened by their members. The security people would be there to ensure that there is safety of the assets of the installations of the judiciary, but it should not be open to the court. If people have important matters that have already been scheduled to be heard today, it means that it cannot come off. As if you are a private practitioner who goes to court, it means that you cannot go to court. And so in the long run, it will affect justice delivery system, because you know what we say, justice denied, delayed is justice denied.
Yes.
If there are urgent matters that ought to have been heard today, it will not come off. And the timing too is very interesting, because just when the old the former chief judges was leaving office, and they've embarked on this strike. So I can imagine how tomorrow, during the vetting of the incoming, the nominee, it will really feature. And I hope the government takes the necessary steps to avert this situation and restore or get them to go to work, so that every person that is seeking that justice would have access to it.
It'll be interesting to see if that intervention will be successful. I don't know. I don't know what what it will look like, but we will be keeping our eyes on this particular strike and update you. So there's this one on transforming TVET. Technical education is very important, and this government has committed quite a lot to see that it is successful. Penelope Brooke Thompson is a founder of the African Center for Technical Training. She's been awarded an extraordinary leader transforming a field by an orthodox philanthropy, and it's all because of TVET. In fact, I have hosted many people. I've hosted Madam Swanika. I've hosted people who are interested in seeing that our technical education is really focused. People do not discriminate against people who opt for technical education because of its importance and a contribution to our development. You are in a field which is, quite not under TVET per se, but do you have any skill that you wish you had, honed, or you wished you had gotten some level of education to specialize in, or maybe even do on the side? And what are your general thoughts about technical and vocational education in the country?
I think that it's sad that as a country, in a long time, we have neglected that sort of work. You will notice that years ago, we used to have what we call life skills in the syllabus. If during your time in junior high or primary school, you had that as part of the syllabus. But in the life skills subject, we were taught basic lesser skills like even sewing,
right,
things like that. And but it's appeared from our syllabus. It is not everybody that would be interested, or should I say, blessed the capacity to be able to do what is called the white collar job, formal jobs. And so, if as a country we do not intentionally develop or provide a structure where the other skills would be developed, then we cannot have a very balanced economy. So that what it means is that those who have acquired these skills, and I think they have a school on the boundary road, where sometimes when they close, see the students that are seeking to access or seeking to be trained in this department. I did some work for some time for one of the designs at the school, and it was interesting how it's very detailed. People who are there are not there mainly because they cannot afford or they do not have the capacity for formal training. Sometimes people are there because that is their passion.
Right.
That is their passion. All their lives, let's say they want to be engineers, but their form of engineering would be, say, machine work. It doesn't mean that they are less able to do what a doctor is able to do. They've just chosen that path. And if the country does not give them the platform to sharpen their skills, encourage them, and because those markets are always there. If you go to school, you learn banking and finance, you have to be employed by a bank most of the time. But when you go to school and you are trained as an auto mechanic, the market is always there because people keep buying cars. People are manufacturing cars in Ghana now. They are assembling it. And so if we have more people skilled and trained and certified, we can even export them because there are other countries that do not have this structure that we need here. And so I'm happy, at least over time, I see a conscious effort by the Minister of Education to develop this aspect of the educational system, and I hope that it is continuing.
That's TVET and STEM. I'm just curious if your second love is auto mechanics. Since you cited us as an example, I'm just wondering, or it has been law for you from the beginning.
Well, if I had not done law, probably I would have gone into acting.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I appreciate your time this morning, Lawyer Bobby Banson, there helping us with the news review. And, well, maybe if someone has an acting job for a lawyer, if you want to...
Well, I'm ready to audition.
Okay, all right, okay. That's good. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, Lawyer Bobby Banson there. You're watching the AM show with me, Bernice Abubedu-Lansa. Up next, we've got AM Sports for you. And then after that, we will be bringing you our big stories to stay.
Good morning, and it's time for sports on the AM show. My name is Haruna Mubarak. Now, former Ghana international Sami Kufuor says Lothar Matthäus played an instrumental role in getting him to sign for Bayern Munich. Now, Kufuor joined the Bundesliga heavyweights in the summer of 1993 after leaving Serie A side Torino. He became a regular player for Bayern Munich between 1996 and 2005. Now, speaking at the event at the German ambassador's residence, Kufuor narrated the role Lothar played in his arrival at Bayern.
To this man, Lothar, thank you so much for everything that you have done for me. I mean, people doesn't know this, and it's very secret. When I got to Germany, I was training with the first team, and he told me, "You are good." I was feeling cold, so he has to go to Thief Garage and bring me clothes. And he takes me to shopping for 2 days, you know. And then Torino, I was coming from Torino. Torino wanted a big money. which was $500,000, and which was 1993, 93. And Romenega didn't want to pay the money. And Luther said, okay, we know that the guy is good. If you don't want to pay, I am paying the money from my pocket to sign him.
Wow.
So when he developed, then you have to pay me 10 times.
Oh, wow. Wow, big round of applause. That's news.
So, and then the buyer immediately, they signed me. And
you were a teenager then? You were very young?
I was very young. I was very young, but he saw the potential in me. And playing alongside him was a dream come true, because when I was young, watching him play in 1990 World Cup, become the best player of the tournament, the World Player of the Year, and me standing in the same training ground training with him, what blessing more did I need?
I'm going to ask you, were you not, I know Sammy Kufuor has a big heart, and were you not at any time thinking, this is crazy, can I do it? Or you had that confidence?
No, because I know where I'm coming from. I come from a very poor background. So I decided to kill myself for that moment, because it's an opportunity that maybe not come again. And he helped me to achieve my dreams.
And then Luthers, what did you see in Sammy Kufuor? Because, you know.
Yeah, I see potential in him, like how I see now the players from Accra Lions, a lot of potential. But this time I was a captain, I was one of the oldest players in the team, and I know you need a support. When I come in the young age to Borussia Mönchengladbach, my first professional football club in Germany, 500 kilometers away from my home village, and I played before in 4th division, and now I stay in a team in the Bundesliga. Sure, you need help, and I know it from my young age how we support the players. I like to give the support the same the players who come in the young age to Bayern Munich, and I saw immediately really potential in him, and Bayern Munich really, Uli Hoeneß and Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, so much money. So I say, sorry, I really like to pay this and give it me back later, or we share the next transfer, doesn't matter, because I saw potential he can help us. He can bring us to a higher level. And he was working every day very, very hard, and later we was profited from each other. He take the ball from the another team, give me the ball, and I construct Ghana, the country Ghana. He was a good ambassador for in this time, and he's still ambassador for Ghana in Munich and in Germany, because everybody know him.
Away from that, the Black Princesses have begun working on improving their goal-scoring ability ahead of their next encounter against Ivory Coast in the Waffle Zone B U20 Cup of Nations. The Ghanaian team secured a 3-0 win in their opener against Benin. However, head coach Yusuf Bazigi was not so impressed with their composure in front of goal.
We need to open their lungs by pushing them a little bit so that we rekindle the endurance level. So that is why after the technique development, we had to take them through small-sided game, which is quite intensive, but very short, because we need to do that so that it will awaken them, for them to prepare mentally that there's a task ahead. And after that, yeah, that is why I started taking them through, and then we'll continue to do that at every session with the scoring. So prepare their mind where to score, and then patience. To have the patience that day on our first game. They had no patience, they were in a hurry to score, and by so doing there were a lot of mistakes that they were committing. Otherwise we would have beaten them more, many goals. So that is why I have started with that, and we'll continue, rehearsing over it, and also with our ball possessions, and then when to defend defensively, how to organize our defense, and then when to go for medium pressing and high pressing. So we are combining all with the assistance of the video analyst. We are going through the segment step by step. I'm even expecting more than that, because with their support, in fact, it really boosts the morale of the players, and we will need them to come in their numbers this time around again until we get to finals and eventually win the trophy. Of course, it's not going to be an easy task, but that is our mindset. And for that matter, I think We really need the supporters to come.
Last week, a 3-year, $3 billion US dollar credit facility was approved by the IMF Executive Board, and a 600 million US dollar has been disbursed to Ghana.
So as we speak right now, Doc, again, help me out with some education that have we met all the requirements for this program, since or some are still being more of a conditional approval and certain things are supposed to be worked on and all the rest, or some will come in the second review and all the rest, especially with some who say that in respect to in Ghana, we're still working on the finalizing the domestic direction program, also engaging our external creditors as well.
Let me tell you, all the requisites by the authorities and what was needed from the international community to be able to go to the board has been met, and therefore the board was able to approve the program request. But this is just the beginning. And as Governor Addison said, there is a lot of work ahead of us. This is a 3-year program that is very rich in policies and reforms with the objectives of restoring the macroeconomic stability, ensuring debt sustainability, and laying the foundations for a higher and more inclusive growth. So the work has just started.
Help me out for the sake of our viewers as well. So it's supposed to be a 3-year program. When does the program officially take off? Was it when the board approved it, or when the disbursement was made, or when Ghana actually starts drawing down the funds? So when the staff level agreement was reached and all the rest. Help us out when you talk about the 3-year program and when officially kicks off.
The implementation has essentially started actually when we were discussing the program that could be supported by the IMF. And we see already some results. For example, inflation came down from 54% in December last year to 41% in April this year. In terms of the milestones and the timeline, a program is designed to have a review every 6 months. This means that every 6 months we are expected to go to the executive board for approval of the review, and then a disbursement can be made. So in terms of the next steps, we are really looking forward to completing the first review, and that is expected to be completed, which means be taken to the board for approval in November of this year.
So, and there's some clarity that I wanted. So does it mean that the program took off when the board approved Ghana's program, or the program took off when the disbursement was made? So if you are doing in terms of the calculation wise, that should be the test. I hope I'm not mixing the jargons here. The test date or for it to be calculated going forward.
In terms of the formality, in a nutshell, I would say discussions with authorities, reaching staff level agreement.
Okay.
Getting the conditions that are needed from staff level agreement to take the program to the board. That's the official approval. When you take the program to the IMF board, it's approved, and each time you have approval, you have automatically a disbursement. And then you have test dates that are the test dates that you're going to be looking at when you try to complete the review. For example, in the case of the first review, that is expected to be completed in November, the test date is going to be end June. So we're all going to be looking at variables at end June.
Thank you so much for staying here on the AM show with me, Bernice Abubedu-Lansah. It's time for our first big story, and it has to do with the IMF conditionalities. A lecturer at the University of Ghana, Professor Gyampo, has concerns about the conditionalities attached to that particular program, and he will be joining us hopefully shortly to share those concerns with us. But we've also been joined by Dr. Patrick Asumin, economist at the University of Ghana Business School. So if you may recall, we brought you a brief summary of the IMF conditionalities and what it will mean for you as a Ghanaian. So let me just run you through those. So there's a tightening of the wage bill, and which means that public sector employment will be affected. Then there's the Bank of Ghana's zero financing of government expenditure, which is that there will be no more financing of central government expenditure. Then there is the utility tariff adjustment, electricity and water tariff projected to go up for effective June 1, and you may be aware of the PRC statement, which indicates that. There is the introduction of new taxes, and you know about those that have already been introduced. Those preceded the board approval. And then there's the tightening of monetary policy, which is that cost of borrowing may remain high. So let me just run you through some of the things that Professor Gyampo talks about in a post that was put out. And briefly, he talks about the fact that, and these are his views on the conditionalities, the measures that may impose some hardships that ideally should be endured with the understanding that we must all sacrifice in order to turn things around. They are measures that we could have implemented ourselves without receiving them as orders from the IMF, a sovereign nation headed by a regime that touts its credentials of having the men should have known and implemented these interventions without waiting for the IMF to tell us what to do. Now, he's questioning whether this is a truly well-negotiated deal. He's asking if the IMF truly knows what is going on in Ghana, particularly on matters of corruption. Quote, "I ask this because in Ghana we are always caught in the quagmire of fetching water with a basket. Yet nothing substantial was said to help us check the leakages and slippages. Indeed, in the fight against corruption, the talk about the continuous implementation of a national anti-corruption action plan that exists merely in name by the document shows that the IMF perhaps is no longer a serious institution." This is because it doesn't appear there will ever be serious efforts at implementing the NACA, and an IMF that does not know this is bogus. In all honesty, it appears the IMF of yesteryears is no longer the IMF we see today. They are no longer bold, they are no longer courageous, and they seem to be tacitly perpetuating a cycle of African dependence on the West. Otherwise, how and why were very low-hanging serious recommendations that would help us quickly turn things around overlooked? Is the IMF ignorant that we earn just about only 5% of royalties from our gold? Is the IMF not aware that we produce oil and yet earn only just about 13% of revenue? Why didn't they talk about we taxing the extractive sector adequately to raise more revenue for ourselves? Why were they silent on what we must do to stop illicit financial flows? Do they come from countries whose sizes of government are as bloated as ours? Were they coerced to keep quiet about the local and international calls on our government to downsize? To my mind, any IMF conditionality that is unable to answer the questions posed above is a mere propaganda that seeks to inflict hardships on the poor, make Africans dependent on the West, and cover up for leadership incompetence and unwillingness to sacrifice. Let the government be warned that Labour would resist any unnecessary imposition of hardships on poor people without palpable show of sacrifice on the part of political leadership. The IMF must know the Ghanaian is intelligent enough to know when a cycle of dependence is being perpetuated, and we will soon resist. If the IMF truly wants to help us, then they must be bold in telling us nothing but the truth so we can wiggle ourselves out of imposed and our self-inflicted hardships. An IMF that fails to do this will deepen the derogatory but sometimes deserving perception that reduces it to a spineless organization staffed by cowards, praise singers, and funful respecters of failed African leaders. Gyampo. is writing this. And like I mentioned earlier, we've been joined by Dr. Patrick Assuming, economist at the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you so much for holding on, Prof. I appreciate it. We just needed to set the background and the tone for this conversation. Now, this is what Professor Gyampo thinks. There were calls for government to downsize, especially when the domestic debt exchange program was announced and implemented. There were those who said that we cannot pay for the sins of the actions and inactions of the government. And so the government should have shown a certain level of commitment itself by downsizing and cutting down its expenditure. So we've run through some of the conditionalities, and also some include deepening public financial management, strengthening state-owned enterprises, operationalizing our integrated tax administration system. But missing in there is the conversation about downsizing government. You've heard the arguments of Professor Gyampo, and I'm sure that you know into detail what the conditionalities of the IMF deal are. Do you agree with your colleague?
Good morning and good morning to viewers. Thanks for having me. So I think my colleague Prof. Gyampo has made some very valid and important points. So, you know, we have a fiscal problem, and we have to consider revenue and the expenditure side. I think that, I mean, if you talk about the downsizing in particular, I mean, yes, downsizing would have saved the economy some space on the fiscal side. But, you know, we can only downsize once. And then, you know, whatever gains we get. I think, for me, the broader issue is the governance problems and the rampant corruption that we experience. I think that one is extremely important. And the worry is that you see in the IMF document, when you talk about the National Anti-Corruption Action Plan, it's referring to something that we started in 2014 that we haven't made too much progress on. So that simply tells you that we haven't really made progress on that front. Don't forget that this was there before we went on the last IMF program. And we are now going to a new IMF program, and the same things that we have said we will do, we didn't do. And I think that's where I find the criticism of the IMF by Prof. Gyampo quite valid. Because if you look at the new documents, some of the things that were there were things that we put in the previous IMF program that we were on. Now in 2019, somehow the IMF agreed for Ghana to exit the program when a lot of these benchmarks had not been approved, had not been achieved. And yet we are starting a new IMF program, and these same things are there. So you have to question why the IMF has overseen us, you know, putting things in documents that we don't do. And then it's led us to some problems. And suddenly we have to redo them under rather much harsher conditions, because I think the current IMF program that we are going to, in terms of the pain and difficulty that will be imposed on ordinary Ghanaian businesses and individuals, is probably the harshest we've seen in the 17 years that we've been going to the IMF. So on that score, I think it's definitely a valid criticism. And then on the revenue side, I think we know, and the president has spoken about this before, how much this country loses to illicit financial flows. So, you know, you would have expected that those are relatively low-hanging fruit that we should have spent a little bit more time on. And, you know, I mean, to be fair, the government has done some of the things we've discussed in the past, the exemptions bill and the property taxes and all. But there's still a lot of scope for the government to do more. Now, on this side, it appears that the government has decided to shift a lot more of the burden to ordinary Ghanaian households and businesses. If you look at what we have done to even get the deal, the domestic debt exchange and the difficulties that is bringing to the banks, and then you look at the tariff reviews that we've already seen. This year alone, we've seen the electricity tariffs go up substantially, and then also the new taxes. So I think it's a valid criticism to question how much of the sacrifice is coming from the government relative to the share that is being pushed to
Right.
Ghanaians.
Doc, we've been joined now by Professor Gyampo via phone. Good morning to you, Prof. I appreciate your time here. And I've just gone through your write-up. I've gone through portions of it and shared them with our viewers. But I would like for you to tell me, in one breath, where you start talking about your concerns or the issues you have with the conditionalities, you state that these are things we could have, or decisions we could have made ourselves as a sovereign state without a certain order from the IMF. And my question to you is, the issues highlighted that you would have wished for the IMF to include, like the issue of downsizing government and all, can't we locally once again begin to start having that conversation, since clearly the IMF ignored it? Or is it a thing of trust? You don't trust the government enough to, even at this stage, be able to take that decision solely, even as we've received approval of the deal?
I want to talk about local pressures again, because we've had a government that does not pander to local pressure. If you talk about downsizing government, for instance, there's been international and also national or local calls on the government to downsize, but they've been overly intransigent. And my disappointment with the IMF is that these are officials whose countries do not have the size of government that we have. And if you could not look into the face of government to tell them that, look, also as a conditionality downsize, then I'm wondering whether they are cowards or they do not really mean well. Honestly, in my candid assessment, I want to believe that the IMF now is more interested in putting in conditionalities that would help it recoup or get the government to settle its debt owed to others and owed to the IMF itself, without thinking about how we managed to get indebted to them. And so it will help you to settle your debts and do other stuff. But the fundamental question as to how you guys became indebted, they are not interested in helping you to address, and how you can prevent future in the future in incurring more debts. They are not also concerned. And if you are giving us assistance, then you should also be interested in the kinds of things that we can do to raise money, internally or locally. And you can see most of the things the questions that I put, I mean, they are not questions that are so hidden that couldn't have been anticipated and answered. For instance, I raised this issue of, from independence up to now, look at how much we earn from our gold that we extract. Just 5% royalties. If we are going to be begging money from the IMF, and our politicians, for whatever corrupt reasons, they are not interested in raising that kind of royalty from 5% to another threshold, the IMF could have pointed it to us and say, look, raise more money from your gold. We pump oil, we produce oil here, and we get less than 15%. It's about 13%. Muammar Gaddafi was getting 70% from the production of oil, for his country. So can't we, if we cannot think, and then IMF is also interested in helping us, can't they also say that do something about the money that you get from the production of oil, renegotiate to be able to get more? Can't they tell us? And in the fight against corruption, I heard my colleague saying, it's been the National Anti-Corruption Plan is a document that is so toothless, is so, I don't know, but it's been there in perpetuity for a long time, around 2014. And we don't see any proper, meaningful implementation of that document. And yet, the IMF agrees that, you guys continue to implement that document. So we are always fetching water with a basket. Why don't we talk about illicit financial flow? Why didn't we talk about that? Why didn't we also talk about then taxing the extractive sectors more so that we can raise more income from those, angles? We are not talking about all these things, and IMF is not helping it. And yet we see the IMF as saviors. I am not thinking that they are saviors. Per what they keep doing to many African countries, in my view, is just a practice aimed at perpetuating African dependence on the West, so that helping ourselves will not be option, but dependence on them for assistance will be the way to go. But I think that our leaders should be able to see through this. If our leaders know and they will not ask, we the ordinary people will have to see through this and put in the necessary pressures on leadership to be able to sit up and act. And like I said, I know the IMF, their conditionalities will definitely have some austerity implications on the ordinary people. And I've said that, look, labor will not sit down to endure unnecessary austerity conditionality when clearly you don't have a palpable demonstration of sacrifice on the part of leaders.
Prof, during the presser to announce the deal for Ghana, the IMF mission chief for Ghana, Stefan Rude, when he was asked about the sustainability of the program, spoke about the structural reforms which he was confident would lead us on the path to long-term sustainable economic reforms. Do you agree that the conditionalities that have been attached, some of which you highlight in your write-up, would lead us to that point, even if those that you have suggested were not included?
No, see, so those that I have suggested are mostly the kinds of things that led us to go to the IMF.
Right.
And so, like I indicated, the IMF is mostly interested in how we can solve a certain problem without being interested in how we got into the problem. And that is a very weak way of solving a problem. Okay, it's a very reactive and temporary way of solving a problem.
So sorry to interject, Prof, but talking about accelerating energy sector reforms, talking about structural reforms to ensure Cocoa Board's financial viability, operationalizing an integrated tax administration system, all these for you do not help in solving the problem?
All these things have been recommended, and because we have challenges in those areas. Now, the challenges in those areas mostly are as a result of corruption that we haven't been able to fight well. And so my point is that if you properly tackle corruption, these challenges that have warranted the recommendations from the IMF would not arise, or they would minimize. And so then if you want to really deal with the recommendations, first of all, let us look at what led the recommendations we made. The fight against corruption. The National Anti-Corruption Plan that we are touting, or we are talking about implementing, exists merely in name. And from 2014, we've not been able to make any giant strides in implementing it. And so it shouldn't have been part of even the measures aimed at fighting corruption. We should have spoken about more drastic measures of dealing with the canker, and then other things would fall in place. And so I think that the recommendations sort of pussyfooty the problems that we have, and they don't really address the core issues that will have to tackle first. We cannot always be tackling symptoms of a problem without dealing with good causes. And if we do that, then we would always be where we are as a nation. And so that's how come I am disappointed in the IMF. I thought they were staffed with genuine economists, who understand some of these things, and they would help us to address the real root causes of our problem. But like I said, it appears that, look, even if they understand the issue, they are still also interested in making us depend on them rather than depending on ourselves. And so the low-hanging fruit. My sister, I've been saying this. I'm saying if we are able to get the needed resources from our extractive sectors, if we'll be able to get more down. I mean, think about it. That doesn't make sense to you. You produce gold in your country and they pay 5% for us and they take 95% away. That doesn't make sense to you. You produce oil in your country. When we were about producing oil, we discovered oil in commercial countries. We were all happy that we're going to now be economically viable. We're going to be able to raise resources and all that. Then later, some of us told Ghanaians that we should learn to manage our expectations because our politicians do not mean well. And that's how come we are producing oil and we are just getting 13% from the one. We've not been able to have leaders who would say, no, let's sit down and renegotiate this agreement so that at least we can up our percentage and our income from the production of oil. They've not done that. And an IMF that serves as a police officer and is trying to police us is also unable to tell us that, look, renegotiate to get more. Then what sort of IMF is that? An IMF that is interested in making us dependent on them. And that is who they are. And so it is important that some of us expose some of these things so that we educate and sensitize Ghanaians to be able to put pressure on ourselves as a people. That look, let's do, if we really mean business and we are serious, some of the things we can do them locally. And if we do them locally, we'll be able to be self-sufficing such that we may not need a new colonial attitude that is being exhibited by the IMF.
Looking at the point of dependence that is raised in your write-up, and even as you've just stated here, and the obvious problem of we not being able to take some of these hard decisions on our own, it appears that you're quite pessimistic about our ability to sustain the economy exiting this program so that we don't have to go back to the IMF again.
Well, I am pessimistic, but at the same time, I believe that when we begin to talk and sensitize Ghanaians to be able to put the needed pressure on government will begin to do the right thing. And if we do the right thing by correcting the local challenges that we have, then we can go places. We can be able to exit the problem and the program and maintain our economy, at appreciable levels, at levels that we all want to see our economies at. So the point is, we say some of these things not out of malice, but sometimes out of frustration and out of the desire or the need to get government to set up. Because some of these things that the IMF, has ignored, they are the things that we have been saying locally, and government is aware. And so why haven't these things been recommended or provided for in a conditionality? And I don't know how to put it, but the point is, it brings a certain hopelessness, but at the same time, I believe that if we really want to keep the needed pressure on our government and drum home some of these weaknesses and things that have been omitted, we drum them home more forcefully. I believe if a government really wants to tackle our challenges, they may listen and then do the right thing.
Professor Gyampo there, sharing his concerns about the IMF's conditionalities. I've still got Dr. Patrick Esumin, who is an economist with the University of Ghana Business School with me. And thank you for holding on. I appreciate it, Doc. So, yes, we know how much it cost us, corruption, I mean. But there are also those who may argue that many of our problems are structural, they're policy related. So, for example, the IMF talks about strengthening the energy sector. We've seen what the PURC has done, asking us to pay realistic tariffs for the electricity we consume. Just in the Business Finder today, the IMF is asking the Bank of Ghana to stop the supply of quote-unquote cheap dollars to bulk oil distribution companies, which was something that was implemented to ensure that, one, these BDCs can access foreign exchange because it was quite difficult getting it ready on the market and get it at cheaper rates, which then translates into cheaper cost of fuel. So do you totally agree that, I mean, without the conditionalities that have been suggested by Professor Gyampo, then the IMF is bogus, the IMF is not doing its job when it has put in reforms to help us organize and put our structures together?
To the extent of saying the IMF is bogus, but I think that, so there's a clear recognition that some structural changes related to our fiscal has to be implemented. And he's right that, these things the government were told these things even before we signed on the IMF program. But, the other side is that we can make all these governance changes. We have to understand that when we say there are structural difficulties, it's not just structural difficulties with public finances and governance. It's structural difficulties with how our economy looks and how the economy works, the real side of the economy. The fact that, we are increasingly dependent on the foreign goods and services, and we are not making any attempt to change the way the economy works. An economy that primarily, export raw materials and import manufactured goods. And even the raw materials, you see that over time, things that we used to produce ourselves, we are not able to produce ourselves anymore. And we are importing so many things. So there's that side. And then the policy angle, we have to think about policy consistency. So, I mean, the current government came in with those set of flagship programs, the Planting for Food and Jobs, One District, One Factory, the One Village, One Dam, which is supposed to fundamentally restructure the economy and build an industrial base. But then the same government also came up with policies that make it easier to import. So we've had those challenges. So for me, somewhat, it might seem disappointing, but somewhat when you look at what the IMF does, you understand why making those structural changes to the economy are not part of the program, because that's not what the IMF does. IMF usually help you to fight your fire. And then when it's done, what you do with that is what matters. So I think one part that is missing is making structural changes to how our economy works. To be fair to the government, in the 2023 budget, some items were mentioned, in particular to diversify the export base of the economy and to improve competitiveness. But when you look at what will be measured every 6 months to determine whether we are making progress or not, those things are not part. Even the much touted attempt to build social protection to the program, if you look at what will be measured every 6 months, those things are not there. And you get the sense that it's just been put there to satisfy people who are probably concerned that the IMF program will bring difficulties to the poor. So we have to question why, if the IMF really cares so much about protecting the interests of the poor, why isn't both the quantitative indicators that will be tracked as well as the structural reforms, which part is actually meant to address those difficulties? And then we also have to ask our government, if we really mean to change how the economy will work going forward, so that, when we get some macroeconomic stability, we build on it and change our economy fundamentally. Why are those things not being tracked? So it just tells us that, we may well be able to achieve some of the conditionalities and will not necessarily solve the long-term problems of our economy.
But, Doc, once again, is it the job of the IMF to, for example, point you to ensuring that you have more revenue from oil, for example? Aren't we asking too much of the IMF in this situation?
Well, not necessarily. I think, so IMF has come as technical experts. I mean, if you look through the document we've signed, there are a lot of areas where they are going to give technical expertise. And in one specific area, they said that their technical experts have identified sources of revenues, additional revenue potentials for the government. And those ones didn't really include much about how much we getting more from our mineral and oil resources, and then also the illicit financial flow. So I think that is where people can legitimately criticize the IMF that if you are trying to help the government identify revenue sources, why did you leave those ones? So those ones are valid criticism. But, you know, the way the IMF works these days, the IMF works, and, you know, the IMF is not directly, so it doesn't elect our government. So sometimes people even question, you know, from a democratic and governance point of view, why our government is responding more to the IMF than it's responding to the people of Ghana. Because some of the things that are in the document are things that Ghanaians have spoken about, even before we went to the IMF. At the same time, you see, the IMF, when they held a press conference, you know, to announce the staff agreement, and some of the Q&As that came with it, they will tell you that they support the authorities' attempt to do fiscal consolidation. But then they will go ahead and say the specific mode in terms of the balance between revenue and expenditure is the decision of the authorities. So in particular, if you look at the document we signed, it says that the authorities have decided that the consolidation will weigh more towards revenue, and they approve or they support it. So that is the language that is being couched. So, you know, if you take that language on face value, then it behoves on us as Ghanaians to demand of our political leaders, the people that we elect, to be more responsible to our needs than to be more responsible and responsive to the requests of the IMF.
And so in this case, I mean, it's quite a sad picture you paint there about how citizens' views most of the time are neglected, but those same views are accepted when they are coming from an organization like the IMF. And in fact, Professor Gyampo, in his write-up, indicates that these are reforms we could have taken on our own. You find that governments are usually torn between taking the most logical decision against taking a populist decision or a decision that will, in this sense, appear to alleviate the burden of paying for commodities. So take, for example, electricity and how over the years government has tried to subsidize, intervene, and so we have so much debt in that sector which we're yet to clear, and then we keep piling more debt. From the governance point of view, I know you're an economist, but bringing the issue of ensuring that your people are not burdened too much and having to also ensure that you're paying for what you consume properly. It's a balance, isn't it? How do we ensure that we work out the balance in such a way that it doesn't get us to this point again?
So, I mean, when it comes to the energy sector, and I think first of all we have to understand that the difficulties we have with the energy sector doesn't come only from government supporting in terms of price subsidies. We know that when we were in some crisis in the past, we went to some deals that have come to bite us. But in terms of dealing with this structure, I think we have to have an energy policy that feeds into a long-term development strategy that says, okay, these are the sustainable sources of energy going forward. And then if we, think about an optimal energy mix, and then have something that we follow. Not that, sometimes we feel, I don't know, I mean, like you said, government respond to some populist needs and then decide to do something. We all have to recognize that there are some vulnerable people in our society that we have to protect. There's no two ways about that. So that's why we have the cutoffs for determining who can get subsidies and so on and so forth. But it's because we have been very haphazard in how we do a lot of our policies and decision making. I'll give you one example. I think it was 2018 or so when we announced that there was, I think, a 30% cut in electricity prices. And then 2 years later, first of all, we announced this cuts when we know that we are having to do these IPPs, and then we have this pay or take agreement that we are paying that is burdening us. So you have to question, what was the basis for that? Only for a few years down the line, when COVID strike, we now impose a new levy to come and address the debt, the public sector, the debt in the energy sector. So a big chunk of it is that we don't really have any consistent and well thought out long-term strategy for how we deal with things. If we did that, then you know that this is in this particular sector, say energy, this is where we have to go in the long term. These are how we are going to address with people who genuinely have needs that they need government support. And anything else, this is the cost recovery rate that we have to do to ensure that the sector is sustainable on its own. Unfortunately, we haven't had that, and that's why some what we call populism appears, and then other things and policy incoherence appears, and that's why we have been paying energy sector debt since I've been born. I think every year we have energy sector debt. We impose new levies to pay them, and they never get paid. So we really need some long-term strategy.
And what will that long-term strategy entail here? And you could go beyond the energy sector. What for you will be the clearest indication yet that we are ready as a people to get out of the mess we've created politically, socially, economically, in order to make this economy a viable one, and not only viable for a short term, but for a very long term?
So, well, I mean, that will take several aspects. It will have different dimensions. One, so you can think about the financing dimension, because at least it is financing that has brought us here. In my view, we have to understand that our over-reliance on foreign financing, foreign financing of all forms, some aspect of FDI, some aspect of domestic portfolio financing, it's not going to be a sustainable long-term strategy. And the idea that you just sit here and then borrow from the international capital market, well, we've seen where it has landed us. So I think we have to think about how we find more ingenious ways of relying a little bit more on domestic financing. At the moment, we can't say, oh, we are no longer going to rely on foreign financing. But you see, you have to say, which aspect of our economy do we need some financing from others? And not say, oh, we are just going to open our arms and welcome any form of FDI. So in the name of FDI, we've allowed some countries to come and set up shops to retail their, low-cost production from their countries where they are being subsidized. I mean, and then yet we call it FDI. This kind of thing doesn't really support any attempt to industrialize your economy. So we have to think about what financing options are available to us. Whether now we are going to restructure the economy so that we are getting more from our mineral resources, from our oil resources, from our cocoa, and then having to rethink whether we will change how we even finance the purchasing of the cocoa. Because it means that every time, a lot of the gains, a lot of the surplus that have been generated from our cocoa production are being paid out because we are always taking these cocoa syndicated loans and we are paying interest on them. Whereas if we had had a strategy maybe 20 years ago that in 10 years' time, whatever surplus we are getting, we will save some so that at some point we no longer go and do this syndicated loan, then we will be able to keep more of the cocoa money inside. One thing we have to understand is that no foreign investor is going to put $1 in the Ghanaian economy when they are not going to take out more than $1. So it's a cost and benefit. Of course, at the same time, we can't say you no longer rely on foreign financing, because there are some things that at the moment we just don't have the capacity. When it comes to having a long-term plan, then we have to think about the overall real side of the economy and how it is working. And then when we are building, for instance, so we might decide that we are going to invest more, first of all, in agriculture, to strengthen agriculture before we look forward to trying to build on agriculture and do more agro-processing. And trust me, all these things that we are discussing, if you go and check what our main political parties put in their manifestos, at some point in time, they are there. And that's why people bring us to the governance issue. So why is it that we have these ideas, we're able to write them down, and then we are not able to implement them? So what happens between the time you are in opposition and you put a good plan in place to the time that you are in government and suddenly everything goes out? And I think that is where our political scientists tell us that maybe we need more governance reforms, going all the way to thinking about political party financing. Because we've seen that it appears that there are people who invest in political party financing, and then when the government is in power, then they are forced to cut some deals that doesn't serve our long-term interest, because it's time for them to reap the benefit of their investment. So it's a whole, there are different aspects of how our economy works: governance, energy, forestry, everything that we need to rethink, and not just think that fixing one aspect of our economy will solve our problems.
That's a very interesting point you make, Doc, and I'm just beginning to wonder if we should run those reforms alongside this, the structural reforms that are conditions for this IMF deal, and whether that will propel our desire to get out of this mess faster than without running them concurrently.
Well, I mean, we are in the deepest crisis we have been since probably 1983 or so. And when you are in crisis like this, it's an opportunity for you to make changes. And the other aspect is that I've already mentioned that this particular IMF program has cost Ghanaians a lot. Even the prior actions that we've had to take in order to get the program has cost us a lot. And that should be the impetus for us to say, okay, never again. So whatever reforms we need to make, we can't say, we are going to push this thing aside or wait for anything, because they all have to go hand in hand. So, I think it's important that Ghanaians begin to engage and, begin to be a little bit more demanding that if we are going to make these sacrifices, if we are accepting for our government to push a bigger share of the burden of this structural adjustment, these reforms on us, it should come with us demanding that things are changed, that the way the economy works changes going forward, and at the same time, the way our governance works, are also changed. So it's really on us, because as the discussion has shown, we can't expect that the IMF will come and force our government to do all the structural changes, all the difficult things that it doesn't want to do. If you look at the document, and then even from the last IMF program to now, it tells us that there are a lot of things that even the relationship with the IMF will not make us do. It behoves on Ghanaians to be a little bit more demanding, a little bit more engaging, and say that no, you don't want these things again. If you are paying these hefty prices, things have to change going forward.
I appreciate your time here this morning. Dr. Patrick, assuming is an economist with the University of Ghana Business School, leaving us with something to think about this morning while we embark on this IMF program, implement those reforms that will give us the long-lasting desire in terms of our economy. We must begin to have that conversation about the other reforms that will consolidate the gains that we make in that regard. You're watching the AM show with me, Bernice Abubedu-Lansa. When we come back, we will be looking at a history book for primary pupils in Ghana. I would like for you to see it, if we have it ready now, to have that book. We don't have it ready now. When we come back, I will be showing you a book which has a portion talking about the disadvantages of Christian missionaries in Ghana, and it cites, for example, or states that religion is the cause of conflicts. It talks about Christianity increasing poverty in the country and also killing the creative minds of people. Let me just let you see that. Okay, so there you have it. The negative effects of Christian missionary activities. Religion is a major cause of physical conflicts and doctrinal disputes in Ghana and the world as a whole. Christianity has led to an increase in poverty. There is a direct link between religion and laziness, which contributes to poverty in Ghana and Africa as a whole. Religion makes people lackadaisical in their attitude towards finding practical ways to improve their undesirable living conditions. Point 3, some religious doctrines brought by missionaries create a sense of fear or timidity in their adherents. Religion creates an avenue for many tricksters or charlatans to parade as men of God to fleece the poor of their meager resources. 5. Most religious groups discriminate against women in so many ways. 6. Many politicians in Ghana use religion as a vehicle to cause disaffection among people in a bid to advance their political, well, I can see that portion there, but then political interest, thank you. 7. Religion in Ghana does not encourage creativity, invention, or critical thinking because of its conservative or static nature. When we come back, I will be joined by my guest, and obviously, we will be opening the phone line for you to also share your thoughts with us on this matter right after these messages. Do stay. Thank you so much for staying on the AM show. I introduced you to our next topic, but if you're just joining the program, let me just run it by you again. Some parents are raising concerns about content of a history book for primary 4 pupils, and it is a book authored by Francis Benjamin Appiah and Henry David Appiah. It's titled History of Ghana for Basic Schools. It opines that religion is a major cause of physical and doctrinal disputes in Ghana, and that Christianity has led to an increase in poverty. Now, I have been joined by people who work in the education sector. Hopefully we will get people responsible for such decisions that are made in terms of curriculum assessment and the approval of such textbooks. But my guest, Dr. Peter Anti, Executive Director, Institute for Education Studies, and Divine Pe, Programs Manager, Africa Education Watch. Once again, let me run you through the content that is in that book, the content of the book, on the page where they highlight what they refer to as the negative effects of Christian missionaries in the country. I'll just bring you details of that. So, negative effects of Christian missionary activities. 1, religion is a major cause of physical conflicts and doctrinal disputes in Ghana and the world as a whole. Christianity has led to an increase in poverty. There is a direct link between religion and laziness, which contributes to poverty in Ghana and Africa as a whole. Religion makes people lackadaisical in their attitude towards finding practical ways to improve their undesirable living conditions. Some religious doctrines brought by missionaries create a sense of fear or timidity in their adherents. Religion creates an avenue for many tricksters or charlatans to parade as men of God to fleece the poor of their meager resources. 5, most religious groups discriminate against women in so many ways. And 6, many politicians in Ghana use religion as a vehicle to cause disaffection among people in a bid to advance their political interest. 7, religion in Ghana does not encourage creativity, invention, or critical thinking because of its conservative or static nature. Divine Pair Programs Manager, Africa Education Watch. Let me take your initial thoughts to the contents in this book. Do you agree with parents who are concerned, or you think that this is something that children as young as 9 should be exposed to before we even get to the facts of the content?
All right, thank you for having me, and good morning to your viewers and also to my senior colleague, Peter. Personally, I have challenged with some of the content, and more especially their accuracy. You know, when you look at the curriculum, Basic 4 curriculum for religious and moral education, that particular objective for which the authors are writing to is about the pupils debating the effects of Christian missionaries or European missionaries in Ghana, some of their effects. So it's actually expected to be a debate that the pupils were to have. So in so doing, I think the authors were trying to generate ideas about how, or some of the points that the pupils can raise in terms of their debate. But when you look at it, you would have realized that some of the issues that they mention over there are inaccurate. For instance, if you say religion is a major cause of physical conflicts and doctrinal disputes in Ghana, that is inaccurate. So, because in Ghana, we are not having any physical conflicts when it comes to religion. I think Ghana has been started as one of the most peaceful countries, and because of the religious tolerance. So if you promote this in textbooks for people to learn, then it is refuting that particular reality in the country. So for me, one, it is over there that it is not actually factual. And then also, if you look at the Christianity has led to an increased poverty, there is no fact in that too. So there's a need for us to decouple conjecture or somebody's figment of imagination from what actually is the reality when we are writing textbook for our pupils to learn. Because if you look at the criteria for assessing the various textbooks that the authors submit, there are about 10 criteria, and then one of them is the content. And at the content level, one of the things that they look at is the accuracy and the currency of the content matter and the relevance of the content to the curriculum standard. These particular two criteria, which are under the content, I'm sure the points raised in these textbooks are not actually relevant to them. They are defeating these particular items under the content when you look at the criteria in the guidelines submitted by NACA to the publishers, so that they can meet such criteria before submitting their textbook for validation. Actually, for me, I have issue with accuracy, and then how current this issue are. And I feel strongly that the authors did quite poor job when it comes to that particular area of the textbook. And if it also tells that probably NACA hasn't done a thorough job just let this slip by to come to our public domain.
And let me now welcome Dr. Peter Anti. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. We've heard what Divine has to say, his initial comments on the content of this book. I don't know what your initial comments are, but let me just find out from you. In giving me your initial comment, I would like you to also tie in the facts in some of these statements that have been made.
Thank you very much, and good morning to Divine, my brother. I agree with him totally with his submission. I understand the process of textbook review extensively with NACA, and with this, I think that maybe those who did the review of this particular book, especially this particular chapter or page, did not pay attention to the content. Because even if you look at the heading, it is a negative effect of Christian missionaries. Then the content talks about religion. And that means that the people who were writing this book didn't really have an understanding of what they were talking about. Again, I have a little challenge with the level that this is even taught, because for some of us, you would think that this is more subjective. This is more subjective. So if you are teaching case at P4, I mean primary 4, basic 4, things like this, where they do not have the capacity to make their own judgment of the situation, it becomes difficult for them to really appreciate the content. And at the end of the day, what you are doing is that you are feeding them with an information that are subjective. The same thing can be said about maybe the positive aspects of the Christian missionaries that are contained in the book, because others would also believe that those positive aspects are not what they are. So I think that such content should have been moved to even at the upper, the junior high school level or the senior high school level, where the students have the cognitive ability to look at this content and then make informed judgment by themselves, and that is the point that I want to make. I believe that if NACA goes back and look at these contents, they might want to maybe change it to suit the level of the students. But if these contents were in junior high school or senior high school, I think at that level there would be open discussion in the classroom. The teacher would offer some level of explanation. The students can also contribute. And these points can be clarified. But for me, if you look at the heading and the content that is provided, the people who were writing the book themselves had challenges understanding what they wanted to communicate.
Right, Doc, and it's important that you highlight the use of religion and Christianity interchangeably. I was just curious why that happened, because the headline there spoke about negative effects of Christian missionaries, and in some other points, the writers use religion, which goes beyond Christianity, and in other points, they use Christianity. So doesn't this amount to some level of deception? Is it safe to say that there is some deception happening here if you cannot state categorically in some points that Christianity did A, but you can state it in other points?
Yeah, that is the point I was making. I think that they didn't understand what they were doing. Let me put it that way. And that is why we had a second level of a review that is carried out by NACA. Maybe the reviewers of this textbook did not also go through the textbook step by step to appreciate the content that the writers or the authors have put together. Because for me, when I look at the heading and I look at the points that follow, it technically tells me that the authors didn't understand what they were doing. And that is what it is. This should not be part of the content that they had in their textbooks. They should just take this off and then maybe look at other ways of other points that they would want to communicate, because what they have there is completely very, very wrong. They are mixing Christianity with religion and saying other things that are totally subjective. And I think that it is inappropriate for such a document to be given to this level of students, especially when they are put in a textbook and might be treated as statements of fact, which technically is not so.
We've been joined by the Deputy PRO of the Ministry of Education, Yawo Poku-Mensah. Mr. Poku-Mensah, thank you so much for agreeing to speak to us on this particular issue. So you heard Dr. Peter Anti there. There are some concerns about the level of education and the content that is being given to the kids, and also content about fact and whether these are subjective or objective statements. What is the GES's position on the matter?
Let me say a good morning to yourself and to our lovely viewers and to my brothers on the other end. From the ministry angle and with respect to NACA, the content that you provided on the screen is not what the approved content by the publisher is as we speak. The final document or the final approval which was given to the publisher to work on isn't what you displayed on your screen, and therefore the content is not an approved content of NACA. So it can't be the official content approved as the process in approving a material for use in our schools go through. The quality assurance process and the final outcome of the process did not approve the content as you've shown on your screen. And therefore, it isn't a NACA approved content as the book or what you displayed on the screen shows.
Okay, but this has been published. It has the symbol NACA approved. If we show the first page, History of Ghana for Basic Schools based on the new standards-based curriculum, Francis Benjamin Appiah, Henry David Appiah, Learner's Book 4. And we'll be putting that on our screen. It has NACA approved just on the bottom right corner. And so if you say that this is not approved, which is the approved one? And what is the content on that page?
With my contact with NACA with specific to the information that was provided me, the final document, which was approved by NACA for use or to be published, did not have that actual content that you provided me. That is the briefing that I have. So, but it's a good feedback, and the NACA, per my indication, is calling on the publisher to look into what was approved for them to be used, because if you bring a material out to go through that process, after the final work, a copy of your material is left with NACA, and therefore they will know whether the approved content is what you've published, and that is what is out there. And from my conversation with the Director General of NACA, the content as you sent me is not what was approved.
Is there a way there are checks, right? So you approve a certain document, and sometimes these things could be a technical error, because I mean, this is printing, this is publishing. Probably someone didn't edit properly. Is there a way there is a sample given to NACA or the GES before large publications are made?
So
run us through the process, basically.
For approval of content to be used in our schools is solely within the domain of NACA. And therefore, NACA do have its own process from the review stage to the its final approval. Every item which is identified and where there is an objection to the item identified, it is given out to the publisher to work on. And after working on, you bring what was given you and what you worked on back to NACA. And again, if they do have an objection to the items that you brought back to them again, it is referred back for you to work on until the final approval is given to you through a letter indicating that your material has been approved and therefore can be printed out onto the market for our various schools. So the final document that you do, which is approved with that letter giving you that indication that you have the green light to work on, is left with NACA. So that is why we are able to tell that the content that we are discussing now is not what was approved for use by the schools. And again, let me add up that there are books which do have NACA approved, and there are books which also have based on NACA approved curriculum. So the difference here is that the first one indicates that it is a NACA approved material, and the second one indicates that it is not a NACA approved material, but the writer says that he wrote its content based on the approved curriculum of NACA. And it can again be the situation that some publishers may go ahead of themselves, do or print some materials with the confidence that the content that they provided wouldn't have any objection to it. And when they go and there's an objection to it, instead of removing or doing away with the earlier publication, they put all of them together and bring it onto the market. And there are instances where some of these publishers have been reported to the police and they are facing prosecution as we speak. So the content as you provided on the screen is not the content that was approved by NACA as part of the process in approving the textbooks for use in our schools.
Right. And so let me just, I'll ask you to hold on and let me just find out from Dr. Peter Anti. Doc, so we've heard from the GS on this matter. We are being told that this is not what has been approved. But I'm just curious about surveillance, for example. So when it comes to drugs and food, And we know what the FDA does, goes onto the market to survey, to ensure that people are doing what is recommended of them. People are not selling goods that have been smuggled into the country. What do you know about the job of NACA in that regard?
First of all, let me say that the book that you are showing is approved by NACA. You see, there's a published document of, I think it's about 66 pages that lists all the books that have been approved by NACA. And this document is there. It's page 56. So this book is approved. Okay, so let's settle that. Again, if this is not what was given to the authors to work on, and I said I understand the processes extensively because I know how those things work, and I have the privilege of doing some of these things. So I understand the processes extensively. If this is what was given to if this is not what was, if this is not what was given to the authors to work on finally, then the authors needs to be blacklisted by NACA, and that should be it. Because these books are in the market with this content. What it means is that once they were going through the NACA approval process, they had published the books already. Okay, so these books the authors should be blacklisted and not allowed to publish for NACA again. Again, I expect NACA to release an official statement indicating if what we are hearing is true, indicating that there is another set of books by the same author that they have approved that have different content than this that we are looking at. But this is the book in the market with the content as displayed. And sometimes when you're making some of these things, we should be careful because people have copies of these books and they have shown it to us. And we have seen that this is what the authors put in the market and they are selling. So we should rather focus on the authors and let them know that what they have done is wrong, because this is not what NACA asked them to go on and then publish. You can also look at it from the point of view that maybe the reviewers of this particular book did not do a thorough job, and we have to say it as it is. But to say that this is not approved by NACA and the approved books in the market is different from this, it's a little bit inaccurate, because this is in the list of books that have been approved by NACA. The books that were published by NACA is there, page 66. The authors, the book, everything is there. Again, this book is in the market and students have had access to it and they are using it. So we should now target the authors where either they didn't listen to NACA, and this normally happens. Some of the publishers, while they are going through the review process, they go on and publish and then put it in the market, and parents would buy this content because, of course, they need the boost to guide their case for their education purpose. So maybe after they have finished the review process, they went ahead to print another set of books. These are the explanations that we should be put in the public and alerting the public that these authors have violated NACA rules and processes, and they need to be punished or sanctioned for that purpose. But we shouldn't create the impression that this is not a NACA approved book, because the fact does not speak to that particular issue.
Mr. Poku-Mensah, so there are parents, as we are told by Dr. Peter Anti, who have copies of the book, which have been shown to his institute, which is one that focuses on education. What should we expect from the GES? So if this is, according to Mr. Anti, in circulation already, what's the next step?
Let me correct something here. I told you that content approval with regards to book is purely within the domain of NACA.
Yes, I appreciate that.
And that is not within the domain of Ghana Education Service.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I think you interchange the GES and NACA.
No, I'm not. I'm only asking you that question because you, as GES, supervise the work. Please.
No, wait. Before you continue, coming from the wheels of the Ministry
of Education,
not Ghana Education Service.
You speak for the Ministry of Education. I introduced you appropriately.
So that is what. Yes, that is what. So
and that's why I'm saying that you have oversight responsibility of all these agencies or institutions of education. And that's why I'm asking you what the next step is, right?
Yeah, so as if Doug was listening to me carefully, I indicated that you do have NACA approved. And I was indicating that the final item or the final content that was given to the publisher to work on isn't what you've displayed on the show. I'm not saying that this material wouldn't be found in the NACA listed item. And again, he comes back to confirm that a publisher may go ahead of themselves for the final approval to be given. They have some copies already printed. And that is what I indicated. And they will mix it up with the one which is approved and it's taken onto the market. And I went further to indicate that there are some publishers who are facing prosecution as we speak with regards to the same item that you've displayed. And it is a feedback to us. I have given an indication that the NACA Director General is in possession of the item that you displayed, and they have a copy of the content that was given out to the publisher to work on. And so the other step will be to invite the publisher and take the publisher through the process, and again ensure that the quality assurance process is adhered to, and materials within our market and within our schools are the ones which have been approved for use by our various schools. So what we are discussing now is in the interest of the ministry and NACA as an agency under the ministry. We do have this as a positive feedback to the work that we are doing, and we have a responsibility to ensure that content which are given out, content which are studied in our various schools, stands the validity test and is able to build on the inner built potential of the learner. And it is up to the ability or the development stage of every learner. So we will take this up, and it has already started. The NACA Director General is working on and ensuring that the right thing is done.
Well, I appreciate your response to that. And Divine, would you suggest that we recall the books even while we wait for whatever investigation or whatever work it is that NACA will be doing in addressing the issue?
Okay, thank you, Bernice. Before I answer your specific question, for me, I believe that my good friend Yao would have been doing us a good service if he were to be here telling us what the actual book or the approved book, as he said, actually contains. But right now, he's just telling us this is not it, and it's just being based on NACA approved curriculum. But if you see what is described on the book, it is saying NACA approved, not based on NACA approved curriculum. No, so this is NACA approved. And as Peter said, if you look at the list of approved books submitted by NACA on their website, you'd have realized that this book is also specifically mentioned. You know, the process of reviewing books actually has 4 stages. We have the submission, the assessment, the verification, and the approval stage. So after the submission, the assessment stage comes in, and at the assessment stage, 2 panels are constituted: the content review panel and then the technical review panel. And the content, they look at the content review, and then when they pass it, technical people also look at it, and if they pass it, they can move it to the next stage, which is the verification stage. So at the assessment stage, when they have an issue, they write to the publisher or the writer of the book and mention that he or she corrects some of these issues that they may have identified in the book. And then the author will resubmit, and if they are finally okay with it, it goes to the verification stage. So I'm hoping that if indeed it was initially submitted and then the reviewers identify issues with it, that later we could have even been reading that later to us that yes, this was identified at the review stage, and then these are the issues that the people identified, and this specific issue was also mentioned on it. So for me, I believe once he was getting information from the director of NACA, they could have also helped us that, yes, indeed, we identified this, and this is the letter we issued to the author that this particular issue may not be accurately captured. So look at it. That letter, if indeed they have identified and written to the authors, I believe they could have just also made this particular letter available, and people would have read it on for us. So for me, I strongly believe that there is kind of a slip on the side of NACA, maybe at the other two stages, which is the assessment and the verification stage. Because after the two panels are done with their review, it goes through to the textbook and other educational material subcommittee of NACA for the final validation before approval is given. So that committee probably also may not have noticed this. So again, it comes to the quality of work that is done at the review stage. So what can be done for me, if indeed the authors were giving accurate book, but they end up publishing something that is inaccurate, then I believe that they should face penalty for that. There should be a punitive action against them. That should be the first step. If they have to be blacklisted, that will do so well. And then we can move to the stage of recalling these books off the market. Because once we're saying they are not approved, then it means that they don't have to be on the market. They have to be recalled, and then also communicate issue out to parents to desist from purchasing this book, and as well as teachers also assisting their students to purchase this book. So it's very important that these books are recalled once Yahweh saying that they are not approved. Then the only thing is that recall the unapproved book off the market so that they do not continue circulating on the market and finding themselves in the home. But I strongly believe Yahweh would have done well by bringing that letter that the committee made have issued to the authors, indicating that they have not approved this particular area of the content. And that would have helped all of us with the discussion we are having. But going forward, generally, I believe that this is not, we have to look at the issue holistically on a broader scale. There are other books on the market. I have seen a few of them, that there are other issues. And if you look at it, you will realize that some of the authors have issue with interpretation of the curriculum standards. So they end up writing something that may not be specifically tailored to the curriculum objective. That's one of the issues I have identified. So it's very important that NACA continues to work the capacity of their publisher to be able to understand the content of the curriculum so that their writing can be properly suited to the curriculum objective. Otherwise, we may be facing some of these. I know NACA has been building the capacity of authors. Recent one was in Accra College of Education, and there was another one in Kumasi. So they have to continue developing the capacity of their publisher. But again, teachers would have to be very crucial in helping parents as to what book they buy for their award. I believe parents, if they want to buy books for their award, they need to consult teachers on what actually should be in the hands of their children, so that I believe teachers can do a thorough job in helping this particular parent get the accurate books on the market by vetting some of this content before buying. It's very, very important. And lastly, I would have to mention that the publisher themselves must begin to engage professional writers. It's very important. You look at some of the content and you see that, look, this is not professionally written. So
it's Thursday, the 25th of May, 2023.
They need to invest in their authors, get professional content writers, other than just, excuse my word, picking anybody to just write, because these are what children are learning, and we must get the qualified people to write the content for us. So the authors, the publishers might invest equally in getting best authors to write their book, and that NACA must continue to work the capacity of their publishers, as much as also it's important for parents to work with teachers so that they can get a quality book on the market for their works.
Well, Mr. Ayawasu, do you have any response? Divine had some reactions to your submission. Would you like to respond to them?
As I indicated, I think the focus should be on the content as you displayed, and whether it is what the final approval stage gave out to the publisher to work on. And I think Dr. Peter Anti mentioned what some publishers probably maybe do. And then as I indicated, others may go ahead of themselves and do a publication which wouldn't have the final one which is done. Because any objection which is raised as part of the process, that the document that you brought plus the one that they ask you to do, you bring both back for them to ascertain whether if you are doing the right thing before the final stage approval is given to you with a specific letter indicating that you do have the green light to work on your document. The book as displayed, I'm aware it is not the content as approved by NACA.
Mr. Opoku-Mensah, are you able, I know you don't work with NACA, but you just mentioned that you have been in touch, you have been told that this is not the approved book. Are you able to share with us the information on that page for the approved book?
Yeah, I am trying to get that material for you. I wouldn't hesitate sharing it with you and to my other colleagues on the other line. But my briefing is what I've given out, and that is what I'm expecting, and I'll do justice to that for you to see the right information which was given out for the publisher to work on.
Right. So we will be, hopefully you can get us as soon as possible so that we can get that before we wrap up the conversation on this issue. If you just joined us, we're having a conversation about content of a history book for primary 4 pupils in Ghana. And on that page, there are content about some negative effects of Christian missionaries in the country. Dr. Peter Anti and Divine Pair have raised concerns about the factual inaccuracies of some of the statements there. They've also questioned why religion and Christianity are used interchangeably. And there are concerns also about whether or not this is exactly what has been approved, as we have seen of that book and confirmed by Dr. Peter Anti. It is in circulation. It is a NACA approved book, and it is what some Ghanaian students or pupils are holding as a textbook for their history education. So your final words, Dr. Peter Anti, on what to expect and how we should move forward, or the lessons we can learn from this particular situation.
To state that I am fully aware of this activity by certain authorities. And that is why I don't want NACA, GES, or the ministry to carry this burden on their head. This is an example. I mean, this is a case that they can use to deal with authors that go ahead to publish and circulate and sell their books while they are undergoing the process. So they should use this as a scapegoat. If truly the content of what they approved is different from what is in the market, then this is a classical case for them to deal with authors that are engaged in this kind of activity. So we are waiting for NACA to issue a statement to see, for us to know that this is not what they approved, and these are the actions that they are undertaking to bring the authors of this book to bring the authors of this book. I was going to use book again.
Book to book.
Yeah. So that is basically what I would want to say. We need to sanitize the system in terms of textbooks that are being read by our kids, especially kids that are not able to make informed judgments. And some of these information should not be allowed to get into the market. And that is why we are calling on NACA to indicate that this book and these authors violated their processes, and therefore they have been blacklisted, and henceforth they will not be given any opportunity to publish any book in the market. This is purely within the domains of NACA. They, I believe, have done a good work if they indicate that, or they are indicating that they didn't approve this kind of content. So they should go ahead and let us know, demonstrate that that is what it is, by issuing a statement to clarify and also bringing the authors to book. This should be the way forward.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Peter Anti. Divine, your final words.
All right. Personally, I'm finding it difficult to understand why, if indeed NACA has issued a communication to the authors that we have issued on this particular content of your book, and then the authors will ignore that to go and publish otherwise. I'm having difficulty understanding why that would have happened. So I'm still skeptical about the fact that NACA has not approved this particular area of the book. So for me, when NACA, as Peter is calling for them to issue a communique to the public, if they are doing so, it will help all of us if the communique is accompanied by the correspondence they have sent to the publishers about this particular area of the book and any other area of the book. Is very important. This is important because it will just help NACA for us also to ensure that subsequently in their review, they are able to do a thorough job. We are not saying they haven't done a good job, because if you look at the number of books they have approved, a lot has gone into it. And if you look at the content review committee, it's made up of only 3 people, and the technical committee is made up of 6 people. If it will be that they will need to increase the capacity of their committee members to do subsequent better job than this one, that is also welcome. So for me, I am calling the fact that NACA issuing a letter into the public to clarify this should come with whatever they may have issued to the publishers. But again, it's very important for the capacity of the publishers to be continuously developed so that they can understand the content matter of the curriculum and tailoring their content to the specific objective of what the curriculum intends to achieve. And again, it's very important for the publishers also to engage professional authors. And finally, if indeed it is found out that NACA has issued a communique to them not to publish this book, but they went ahead, strongly a punitive action needs to be taken against the authors so that we discourage this happening.
Thank you. And Mr. Opoku-Mensah, I hope you've been able to get the actual content. If not, your final words, and we wrap up the conversation.
Yeah, so we are mindful of our mandate in building a 21st century learner, building a 21st century education that is meaningful and addresses the development challenges of our country. And that is the driving force. And that is what we are trying to achieve. And therefore, we are mindful of the content which we provide in our schools. And at the end of the day, we are mindful of the outcome of the content and the individual that is produced after the whole process. Mind you, learning as a relative feminine change fits within the sociological understanding of what education seeks to achieve. So therefore, we wouldn't do anything that will distract the ability to build a 21st century critical learner and a creative learner as the curriculum seeks to achieve. So therefore, I want to urge the public to be mindful of the items in the market, especially with regards to approved books that they want to use. And if anybody do have any difficulty in a publication which is on the market, they shouldn't hesitate contacting the outfit of NACA for redress or understanding to what is being put out or what they found in the market. So we see this as a positive feedback, and we will encourage the public to team up with us so that we can have the best of our education to build that 21st century learner that we seek to build. So it is a good call, and we expect some of these feedback to help so that we can have a good system for the betterment of our education system. So when the material is ready, I wouldn't hesitate. I'll share it with you, plus Divine and Peter, so that we'll be on the same page and see what is happening at our outfit.
Thank you so much for your time. Ayawasu Opoku-Mensah is Deputy PRO of the Ministry of Education. Earlier, you heard Divine Pep Programs Manager, Africa Education Watch, and Dr. Peter Anti, Executive Director of the Institute for Education Studies. Let's stay a while on education. Out of the 257 students at the Bandu Primary School in the Northeast Gonja District, only 33 come to school, and this is because their parents are not able to afford 3 square meals a day for them due to rainfall patterns, which is affecting their farming business. Today, Jojo Kobna for Ghana Schools of Shame looks at how the school feeding is impacting class attendance.
Far, everything looks good at Pandu DA Primary School in the Northeast Gonja district of the Savannah region.
All right, you are welcome to Pandu KG Primary Basic School. Here is KG2. My name is Madam Rita Enima. I'm the facilitator for KG2 here. After the Easter holidays, when we came back from the house, children have not been coming to school. Tuesday, only one child who came. Today, only one person who is in. Due to poor parental assistance in the community here, most of the children come to school without eating. When they ask their parents, they will complain they don't have money to cater for their awards. So now, actually, I'm having the total number of 11 students in the class.
They don't feed them. So always, when they are in school, for some short period of time, they will say, oh, we are hungry, we want to go home, because there is no feeding in the school.
Parents here disagree that they are unwilling to support their children. They argued that they built the school, provided furniture, and even paid teachers before the government intervened. The school management committee chairman said their farming business has failed because of unpredictable rainfall, so they are unable to feed their families.
Last time, my son needed a coin, but I shouted at him because I had no money. I was annoyed. I yelled. It spoiled my day. How come I could not give my child just a coin? It broke my heart. Some men are even committing suicide. But I won't do that. We don't have money. Times are really hard. We, the parents of Pandu, built the school. At the time we built the school, we farmed and everything was good.
The few children here say they're also hungry and wish they stayed at home. They want to go to another school where they can get one hot meal a day. But the distance to the next school discourages them.
We are hungry. That is the reason why many of my colleagues are not in school. Other schools have school feeding. I can't force my friends to come to school. I can't give them food. So when I call them and they refuse to come, I can't force them.
The school has no feeding program. When you are hungry, you go home. The next day, you don't think about school. You think about the hunger you face in school, and you rather choose to roam in search of food.
The children also complained about their only source of water. The school has a water tank which harvests rainwater, but the rains are yet to pour in Pandu. So for now, the children would have to endure drinking from the dam.
Anytime we drink the water, we become sick, but we don't have a choice.
When you look at the type of water they drink here, seriously, sometimes the bottle that they fetch water inside, no, it's not easy. When you see it, we even take it and throw it away, but it's normal here for them.
So we visited the dam where the entire community fetches water. The water looks brown and dirty. Some say they use alum to purify it, but many say they drink it in its raw state. This water shared with cattle looks so dirty that some residents in Accra would not even consider using it to flush their toilets. But because clean running water is a luxury here, residents drink the dammed water without giving it a second thought. However, a quick reminder from the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, when he was campaigning in 2016.
The first 2 years of an MPP administration under this Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication program, where every constituency will get $1 million every for rural and deprived communities. Under this program, there should be no village or community in Ghana after the first 2 years that would have a water problem or a toilet problem.
Perhaps this is the perfect time for the Vice President to redeem the promise he made to the people. In summary, the problem here at Pandu is lack of basic needs, access to food and water. A non-governmental organization in the northern region focused on education, School for Life, organized residents of Pandu to form citizen groups to address problems facing the school. With funding from Global Partnership for Education, the NGO is implementing its citizen-led action for educational accountability and responsiveness project. The project has mobilized women, PTAs, youth parliaments, girl caucus, and community journalists to effectively engage local duty bearers, while School for Life engages with the central government. The women's group wants government to start a school feeding project immediately.
The school desperately needs the school feeding program so that the children will come back to school. It is really important.
The district chief executive of the Northeast Gonja district, Mohamed Musa Tindao, says even though he knows the problem facing the school, funding remains a challenge.
Areas where we have the school feeding, attendance there is higher than as compared to areas where we don't have the school feeding program going on. So that is one of the challenges that school feeding has also created. So I will appeal. I know since last year, since I came to office, we've not gotten any allocations. So perhaps we use this platform to appeal to school feeding program to at least expand the coverage, because once the student gets to know that their neighbor is getting this intervention, then parents think that the government is neglecting them because they don't care about them, because they prefer the other community to them. That is why they are not getting it. So there's that kind of misunderstanding. So I believe that with school feeding, it will also help to engender interest in education.
School feeding will certainly shoot up enrollment figures. If the Vice President redeems the government's promise to provide water to every community and village, it would greatly improve the health of the people. Jojo Kobna, Joy News.
This is the AM show on your most credible news source, Joy News, and I'm Bernice Abubedulan. So we've heard from the experts, we've heard from the analysts. It's now time to hear from you. The number to call 0302-211-691, 0302-211-691. Today, we've been talking about the IMF conditionalities, concerns raised by Professor Gyampo about why the IMF doesn't, for him, seem to want to give us conditions that will be long-lasting in terms of giving us the effect that we desire. You've been hearing him. We've also been talking about content of a primary 4 history book here in Ghana, which talks about the negative effects of Christian missionaries in the country. So on the conversation with Professor Gyampo and the others, some of you have been sharing your thoughts with us on what the IMF conditionalities are. And Sue Campbell says, Academia of Ghana and Africa needs to get into politics to fix the politics in Africa. If our presidents are greedy, bad managers of our economies cannot be fixed. So Academia of Ghanaian universities, you need to form political parties and get into politics. You have the knowledge and the expertise. Just talking can't and won't fix Ghana's economy because the politicians don't listen to you. And that had one like there. Eku says, has any government considered the views of experts in this country? We're all going to be in this. That question of where was Prof is an irrelevant one. And someone was questioning where Professor Gyampo was when the IMF deal was being worked on and why he will be talking now about it. And Bernard Bleu says there was no Senche type of meeting. Emmanuel says, okay, so that's the question. Where was Professor Gyampo when the negotiations were going on? He should go back and enjoy himself and give us a break. Anthony has a reply for Emmanuel and says, was he part of the negotiating team? How do you ask such questions when you know so well these guys always hide things? And okay, we'll move on if there are more comments to that. Okuku Seku Suronipa Nejai Samai. I'm highly flabbergasted. The Kufado and his boys have now accepted the word review as to assess and not to cancel, and about reviewing some of the flagship programs just because they want to meet IMF conditions. Well, I hope Ghanaians won't vote for such a hypocritical government again. And this is from Koka Bismarck in Ashali, Botre. So those were some of the comments when we were having that conversation about the IMF conditionalities. You can also call us and share your thoughts with us. You also saw that story put together by my colleague here on Ghana's schools of shame, Dojo Kobna, this time around focused on the school feeding program and the impact it has on the attendance of children of school-going age. And so there are many things to share your thoughts with us on. Also, on the IMF deal, if we can... I have a caller. Let me just hold on with that and speak to him. Hello, Mr. Obra.
Good morning, madam.
Good morning to you. Obla, please.
With regards to the IMF bailout, we are here because of the arrogance of this government led by Nanado and Baumia. When they were giving them warning that they should go for the IMF very early, they were thinking like it was the opposition that wanted the government to go there or something. But they brought this e-levy. They told us that...
Please go ahead. Hello? Hello? Well, too bad. I lost him there. But he was just making a point about the timeliness of government's decision to go to the IMF. If you're someone who's been following the conversation, you know that the experts called before for this much earlier than government went for it. There was a statement by the finance minister specifically stating that we were not going to go to the IMF. And so that was Mr. Oblada. Sorry, we missed you. We have Kojo from Achimota. Hello, Kojo. Let's hear you, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Kojo. I'm calling from Achimota.
Kojo, good to have you. Please go ahead with your submission.
I think this taking Christianity and then making Christianity look bad is part of a bigger agenda. They are trying to take their children from good morals. You know, it's a planting. They know who is behind it. Now you go to America now, they are dragged into classes, and this is the first step they are starting. Today on your sisters on the TV station today, I heard 2 journalists have been awarded for human rights, and then it's all linked to LGBT stuff. I think this IMF deal comes to conditionalities to loosen up this LGBT restrictions on Ghana. It's a whole big agenda.
But Kojo, do you think it's fair to narrow human rights issues to LGBT? That there are concerns about people who are being physically abused. There are concerns about, for example, in this country where people do not get the kind of even health care, right? Basic human rights, potable water. So narrowing it down to LGBTQ, don't you think that's oversimplifying the matter?
What you're saying is very true, but you're just hiding under this umbrella name.
Right.
It's just narrowing it under the umbrella name.
Right. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, Kojo. We appreciate it. That's Kujofo Machimota there, sharing his thoughts on the content of that primary 4 history book, which talks about the negative effects of Christian missionaries. Our analysts who spoke about the matter were concerned about the use of Christianity and religion interchangeably, and they raised concerns about the factual inaccuracies in that particular book in terms of the contents and that particular headline. Listerwell is our next caller. Hello, Listerwell. Let's hear you, please.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you very much for the good work you're doing this morning.
Thank you too, Listerwell, for doing the watching.
In fact, the very program you're discussing concerning the book that has been published by that author is quite, worrying as parents whose words have purchased these books. Seriously speaking, when I was following the story, I was really touched. I asked one question. So, the supervision of these whole publishers and authors, is it up to a task? It is very sad to know that currently schools have bought these books, students are using them, teachers are using the content to teach their children. Now, in your discussion with the panelists, they mentioned that these books should be withdrawn from the market. Financially, or if you narrow it down, let's consider how this is going to cost parents. In fact, I think the NACA, the body of NACA must be up and doing, honestly speaking. Because let's put everything aside. Financially, parents are in their house, they come to tell them that what the books their children are using are not good, so they are going to buy new ones. How is it going to be? Is the school going to take care of it? Is the government going to make that provision? And the most affected schools are the private schools, not the government schools. So, in fact, this is very worrying, and it is so sad. And I'm also sending this message, a plea to proprietors of various schools to be very, very careful when selecting books for their walls to buy, for their students to buy. They should be very, very careful. If they don't have the know-how, they should invite experts to come and assist them so that they make better selections for their schools. Because these things, when it happens this way, private schools who are using these books are also going to suffer, because it's also going to ponder on their integrity and their credibility.
So Listerwell, sorry to interject. I just wanted to find out from you if you'll be more satisfied with a replacement scheme. So if there's anybody in custody of the book, then they should bring it for, as we're told by the PRO of the Education Ministry, the approved one which does not have this particular content.
Very well. That is in order. That is in order. But then, still to say that, yes, there should be a replacement, but whoever is working on a book should also try as much as possible to consider the welfare and the needs of our children. Not only money matters, because whichever way, if you meander your way to, bring your book to the market to sell, just in the name of money, remember you are going to damage the good children we are trying to raise for the future.
Thank you, Listerwell. I appreciate your company on the show. Listerwell there sharing his thoughts on the book. We had that conversation. If you missed it, you can get onto our Facebook page. What we've done is to upload segment by segment, or the first story on the IMF is uploaded there, then the second one on the book is uploaded there as well, and then you can furnish yourself with all the details that our callers have so far been responding or reacting to. We have a caller from Sunyani. Hello, Eric. How's Sunyani, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. Looking at what is happening now, especially in the Western world, this is not a very good book for us to be teaching our children. Now, take morality, take Christianity, take religion out of people, and there are no boundaries. That people can do whatever they want. People say men will say they are women. People will even say they are goats. Like, so many things that like you can't just phantom, you can't think around it. So I think this kind of things is trying to make, like bring this LGBTQ things into Ghana. It is some kind of underground work, because when you are able to infiltrate these things in the minds of children and bastardize religion, then what it means is that you are taking the morality out of them, and that is going to create a chaos society. And I don't think Ghana we can go that lane. Thank you very much.
Thank you too. I appreciate your thoughts, Eric. There, joining us from Sunyani. We have time for a caller or two. I think I can squeeze in about 2 calls before we wrap up the show here on Joy News. All right. Okay. So while we wait for the last caller or last 2 callers, there's a post that I would like to share reactions to with you. Okay. Thankfully, we got a caller. Haruna is calling us from Asin Fosu. Hello, Haruna. Let's hear you.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for having me. You see, this country, our problem is that we allow development to precede planning. And it should be the other way around. How on earth can we say that these books have been there? Which body or unit was supposed to vet these books before coming onto the market? Then we allow these books to get onto the market, and we're not talking about replacements, reversal, etc. I think we should be serious for once in this country. Thank you very much. This is what I have to say.
Thank you, Haruna from Asin Fosu. Straight to the point and brief. But I would just like to add that we were told by the Deputy PR of the Education Ministry that there are processes involved. It is possible that this book got onto the market through wrong means, but he tells us that there are conversations that are underway to try and remedy the situation, and that's why the conversation about replacement or withdrawals came about. But he says, according to NACA, this was not the approved content for that particular book. We'll keep our eyes on this particular story and let you know what NACA says. Dr. Peter Anti, Executive Director of IFEST, is actually asking NACA to release a statement and attach the approved page. And he also wants the authors sanctioned. That is, if they went ahead to publish the book before the final approval was given, hence the reason the book is on the market. We have our last caller from Accra. Hello? Hello, Emmanuel.
Hello, good morning, Dennis.
Good morning,
how are
Emmanuel.
You doing?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Fine, I'm fine.
All right.
Dennis, you see, the issue I'm seeing is these textbooks are presenting some facts. But in reality, what are we also seeing? You see, we have leaders and people who are doing things that suggest that Christianity is actually what these textbooks are representing. Probably if we can fine-tune our ways, especially leadership, and I don't want to be too detailed, but if some things which are preventable are not engaged in, for people to suffer so much, then the ideas or the whatever the textbooks are advances will die of them. So somebody said that it's a strategy to get children have that mindset, so that at this stage they look like they will see Christianity as something bad. Then the whole fabric of society can collapse by then.
Yeah.
But I also believe that it is the attitude that we have presently today that is reflecting, as whether Christians or even Muslims, we are reflecting something which is bad. Corruption, everything that you can think of that doesn't make a nation progress, we the Christians are reflecting it. And so why won't the children see this in textbook and also believe it when they see attitude? I think we should start from attitudinal change first, and then go back and work on the base, the textbooks. Thank you so much.
Right, Emmanuel, before you go, you just raised an issue of the children being indoctrinated, and these are 9, sometimes 8-year-olds that are receiving the content. For Dr. Peter Anti, for example, if it was an adult class, say senior high school, then at that stage they are able to analyze things, they're able to ask questions, it can generate conversation. But for him, the content is even too advanced for that level. I
understand you, but just to make it practical, look at your schools of same thing that they are doing, a child was crying that, I mean, he sees other schools being given all the goodies, they are not being given some. And this is sheer, I don't know, mismanagement or bad leadership. So when he sees that even his school cannot get things that other schools should get, he can link it to what he's seen in the textbooks. Okay, it's true that this is what is happening because Christianity has dominated and has made our leaders like this. So I'm looking at it from the, you forget about the children. My point is, we the leaders, people in leadership, should sit up and do things right, at least for once, so to speak, in Ghana here. When things go well and we forget about especially corruption and the systems are working, nobody will come and tell us that Christianity is good or bad. We will find a way of averting that or dispelling that from the minds of children. But if you are seeing the effects of what leadership is doing, I mean, who can blame them?
And that is to suggest that the people in leadership are Christians, so there's a direct correlation between the attitude of these people and the faith. I appreciate your thoughts, Emmanuel, our last caller for today, sharing his thoughts on the content of that book. I really appreciate all your comments, and I'm sorry to all those whose calls couldn't come through. Hopefully we'll be able to get you in subsequent days on different matters. But that'll be it from me and the entire team. We are so grateful to you for making time to join us every morning. God willing, we are back again tomorrow morning with a show that focuses on what matters to you, because that's what the AM show is all about. Do stay with us. We are home of independent, fearless and credible journalism. I'm Bernice Abubedu Lansa. Up next is News Desk. Do stay.